Well, good morning. How are we feeling today, everybody? Are we caffeinated yet? Have we had coffee? I'm on cup number 4 already, so that's we're rolling today. We're so glad that you decided to join us, and if it's your first time, I want to say a big shout out to you. Today's going to be a great day. We are in the middle of a series called Mastermind, and so for the last probably a little over a month, we've been talking about mental health, and today we're specifically going to be talking about coming around our friends and family who might be walking a difficult road when it comes to their mental health journey, and so it's going to be a great day. Before we jump into the message, though, we've got an amazing band for you. Tell you what, let me go ahead and bring those guys out. Let me bring out the worship leaders real quick. Can we do that? Oh, there's Ryan. Yeah, you guys come on out. I want to introduce you to a couple of these people, and then we'll get rolling. Everybody say hey to Jay Quan. Most of you know Jay Quan. Say hey, Jay Quan. That's awesome. Jay Quan's going to be leading a few songs, and then Ryan's around here as well. Everybody say hey, Ryan Balbadis. Yeah, and I want to introduce you real quick. I don't get to do this a lot. At 9 o'clock, we're all family, right? Are we family? Yeah. So this is one of my favorite people on the planet. Everybody say, hey, Sam Menchaca. It's fun to say Menchaca, isn't it? Don't you enjoy that? It's fun. Sam is one of the best bass players I know, but on top of that, he's one of the greatest guys I know too. So you got a great crew that's going to be leading us in music today. Before we sing, I'd love you to do this. I'd love you to stand up, and I know we're kind of spread out. People are kind of filling in here this morning, but go ahead and stand up. Give 4 or 5 people around you a high five. Let them know how glad you are that they are here, and then we'll get going here in just a second. Hey everybody, this is Patrick, and I just wanted to say thanks again for watching our service today online and being a part of this community. Now, we know that you might have some questions as you watch the service today and want to find out a little bit more information about who we are. And so we've created an environment for you to do just that. Simply go to startingpoint.today. That's startingpoint.today, and fill out that short form, and one of our staff members will reach out to you very shortly and answer any questions that you have about our church and about who we are. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back at the end of the service today to give you a little bit more information, but we'll see you here in just a few minutes.
Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing. In heaven and heaven, nature sing. Joy to the earth, the Savior reigns. Let men their songs employ, floods, rocks, hills, and plains. Repeat the sounding joy. Repeat the sounding joy. Repeat the sounding joy. Sin and sorrows grow, no thorns infest the ground. He comes to make his blessings flow, far as the curse is found, far as the curse is found, far as the curse is found. Truth and grace, and makes the nations prove the glories of his righteousness, and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love. Amen. Good to see you guys. Good to be with you guys. I love that song we just sang. I mean, I grew up singing it. Maybe a lot of you grew up singing it. But I was actually rehearsing it this morning in our living room with my wife. And she brought up this passage that actually connects to it. The person who wrote it, it's an old hymn from the 1700s, really cool. It came from Psalms 98 and Psalms 96. And the original intention was just really to highlight the nations of the world are asked to rejoice because God's faithfulness. And I just love that idea of God's faithfulness. But I think a lot of times we come into a room like this in a season where there's a lot of just busyness, and it's really hard to remember that God is faithful. And sometimes we get caught up in kind of our own brokenness. We get caught up in the things that, just are at the forefront of our mind. And so this next song, Jaquan's going to lead us, and so is Kayla. It's called Gracefully Broken. And so my hope in this next moment is, as we kind of hold the faithfulness God kind of high in the forefront of our mind, we're just also going to thank God for his grace and for his mercy. And even in our brokenness, he is faithful, but he's also gracious. So let me pray with us as we go into that. Lord, thank you so much for your faithfulness, but God, you are so gracious as well. And so God, we want to acknowledge the fact that we're not perfect, but God, it's in your power and it's by your goodness that we're made perfect through your son, Jesus Christ. And so as we sing this next song, I ask God that we would be able to see you clearly in a clearer way through those two words of faithfulness and graceful. God, we love you, God, in Jesus' name.
I have in these hands and multiply, God, all that I am, and find my heart on the altar again. Set me on fire, set me on fire. Take all I have in these hands and multiply, God, all that I am, and find my heart on the altar again. Set me on fire, set me on fire. Here I am, God, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken. Stands in all of your name, your mighty love stands strong to the end. You will fulfill your purpose in me. You won't forsake me. You will be with me. Here I am, God, arms wide open. Gracefully broken. Here I am, God, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken. Jesus now, all to Jesus now, holding nothing back, holding nothing back. I surrender, I surrender.
real quick, can I do this? I don't know if you guys have been properly introduced. Everybody say, hey, Kayla. Wasn't that amazing? Doesn't she sound so great? Let me say one thing. I never heard Kayla sing, and then we threw a karaoke night for our arts people, and she sang karaoke. I was like, oh my gosh. And now she's up here. Thanks so much for leading us. Wasn't that great? Yeah, so good, so good. Hey, one of the things about our church, and if you're new to our church, if you're new to church in general, there's probably this weird thing. You probably only ever read lyrics on a screen and sing out loud at karaoke nights if you don't come to church. Like, that's really the only place that you see that. But for us, we believe that there's something powerful when a group of people come together and we actually say out or sing out or speak out words that we believe that are true. And particularly with that song, it's going to lead us into what we're talking about today. But the idea that we are gracefully broken, that there is something about us, like all of us in the room, where we all struggle, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, Christian or not, church person or not, we all struggle with certain parts of our lives. But the beauty of the gospel is that we believe that it's in our brokenness and in our weakness that oftentimes Jesus does the most powerful things in and through us. And so we're going to be talking about that for a few minutes today, but I wanted to kind of put that in your head before we did. So anyway, I know there's a lot more of you in the room now. You kind of filtered in. If you would do this, go ahead and turn a few people next to you, give them a high five and say, I'm so glad that you're here. And then you can have a seat right after that. I'm glad. All right. Well, again, welcome to Kensington. And today, as I mentioned earlier, we've got some fun things planned for you as we kind of progress through the rest of our time together. Before we did, if you're new, one of the things that I love telling people that are new to our church is you're amongst some of the most generous people on the planet. And a lot of you give to this place. A lot of you give consistently to this place. And then during this time of the year, there's something unique that also happens is a lot of people give towards the end of the year and are part of year-end giving. And so we've been talking about this for a while now. We've been kind of going through some, stories of life change and that sort of thing. But before we really did all that today, here's what I'd love for you to do. I think when you came in, you got a booklet. If you pull off that booklet for me real quick, I'll show you what it looks like. It's all Christmassy. It's got a wreath on it. Pull this out for me real quick. This is a great opportunity, especially if you're new to our church, to see what types of initiatives that you're a part of, both by calling Kensington home, giving here, serving, and volunteering. And so you can kind of flip through it. I'm going to show you, I think it's about halfway through. Why don't you pull it out if you can? And I'm gonna show you this picture real quick. If you can pull it out, I'm gonna show you, if you can pull out this picture real quick, the word Nepal is right there. So if you pull out your book, I'd love for you to look at this. We're gonna look through this together. There's all sorts of initiatives that are in here that are really powerful, but a lot of you have heard us talk about this before. But I don't know, I probably shouldn't say favorite, but the thing that I'm probably deeply connected to that we do, there's something that we do on the other side of the world in Nepal, and you're gonna see pictures of people in here, but you're also gonna see a little bit of the story of what we do in Nepal. What we do here specifically in Nepal is we help bring young girls out of sex trafficking over on the other side of the world. And if you're unfamiliar with that ministry and what Ramesh is doing, we can give you all those details. But it's very, very powerful of what we're able to do both locally and globally, but specifically with this ministry in particular. Now, I'm a father. I have a daughter. She's 1 year old. And there's a part of me that kind of goes after that West Wing episode. And do we have any West Wing fans in the room? Anybody? Yes, all 9 of us. If you haven't watched West Wing, you should definitely do that. Today, actually. But anyway, there's this scene in the West Wing, and it's talking about injustice that are happening with specifically little girls. And I love this. The president in the West Wing, his wife looks at him and says, if it was your daughter, you would do just about anything to make sure that happened. I don't think I understood that line until I had a daughter, and then I had a daughter, and I was like, I absolutely would. I would do whatever it took to kind of make those injustices right and to be a part of those things. Now, here, there's all sorts of initiatives when you give here that you're a part of. But when I think about that one in particular, that just grips my heart. You're a part of helping to change the trajectory of the life of these young women on the other side of the world. And so for us, we just want to say thank you for partnering with us. Thank you, and that's one thing that we're doing, but thank you for partnering with us in that way to help these young girls, again, experience a completely different life. And so what happens is there's a group of people, Ramesh included, that meet them at the border as they're headed into another country, oftentimes to be trafficked is what's going on. They bring them out, and then they train them in a skill set to where they can come out of that and then have a job on the other side of it and be able to provide for themselves, and it completely changes the trajectory of their lives. And so here's what I would say to those of you who are new to our church, and you're like, where's all the money go, and what's that look like, and those lights are moving, how does that all work? Obviously, we do, but at the end of the day, there's this part of it too, where you're changing the course of people's lives and eternity by giving to those kinds of initiatives. And so I would say this to you, if you attend our church and you give here, I want to say thank you. When we come on year in giving, one of the questions that we always ask people is, what would it look like for you to kind of step up and give even more, especially this time of year? But if you're a person here and even you're not a follower of Jesus, here's what I'm going to challenge you to do. Whether you give here or you give somewhere else, we said this last week, what would it look like for you to give specifically to say, hey, I'm going to give intentionally, I'm going to sacrificially give to make the life of somebody else better. So we're going to challenge everybody at our church to do that. Again, whether you do that here or you do it other places, but we want to invite you to be a part of that. So we'd love for you to flip through the rest of this book as you move through the course of our time together. And then today what I want you to do is I also want you to hear another story of somebody who's experienced life change here at our churches. And so her name is Lindsay. We're going to show you her video real quick about how God's been moving even through you to help her to be a part of experiencing life change. So let's watch this video together.
I feel peace. It's just beautiful, perfect, and it's special.
I interned with Kensington about 4 years ago, and my big takeaway from the internship was just this sense of community and being intentional about the community around you and where God has placed you. And I just had this nudge to move into a trailer park and start this idea of a trailer park ministry. We do community events, and we have assistance programs for the whole family.
Food programs and clothing programs as well.
We had met Lindsay, and that was about 2 years ago. Her kids started coming to House of Hope to our youth nights because they saw a flyer in the park office.
People always ask me, how do you do it? And I say, you know what? You just do it. You just do it. Because I can tell you one thing is every day's not boring because we never know what's gonna happen. Our days are crazy. My kids are so amazing. Like, I have daughters that are my best friends. And my boys are so awesome.
And we got to know her as a person, but we also got to know some needs that we weren't aware of. We got to hear more about what was going on in her home.
It was just like a lot of us in like one house, and it was like really small, and like we would go like out in the living room, and then our brothers would always be in the way because they don't have a room. We didn't have a door for our bedroom, so like our brothers were always like coming in and being annoying.
Jojo and Ralphie slept in my room. Me and Javi and the baby slept in my bed. Angelina and Jesse slept in their room, and then Jesse had a little like bed in the living room.
I first heard of Lindsay from Alyssa from House of Hope. And she texted me regarding Lindsay because she knew I was a mobile home guy. She reached out to me just stating that, you know, Lindsay needed some help. As a single mom with 7 kids, her mobile home was becoming dilapidated, and would you mind, you know, taking a look? And I said, sure. I kind of gasped when I walked up to it, like shocked, like, wow, did I get the right address? You know, and I walked up, knocked on the door, and cheery lady, Lindsay, answered the door, and I told her I'm here to look at your house. I'm from FaithWorks.
Things started to fall apart like little by little, I guess. Like we had no windows at one point in time. Like we had cardboard over the windows. Oh, the floor was like caving in the living room. So like you would walk on it and you would like almost fall through the floor. And my mom had to keep like this big table over it.
I was so thankful for it. It had heat. It had hot water. And I kept it really clean. But there was so much stuff wrong.
The rot on the wood and the steps that were just, you know, really unsafe. She couldn't even wash the dishes in her sink because the faucet had failed, and they were washing all their dishes in their bathtub. I mean, imagine that, going from your kitchen all the way to your bathtub to wash dishes every day with 7 kids. So
They started fixing up some things around Lindsay's trailer, but it just became very apparent that there's only so much you can do.
the Holy Spirit kept on telling me, Dan, I got bigger plans for her than this. And so I really paused. I had to pause the work because it was so obvious that there was a different plan. I just had to ask him, what do you have in mind? I buy and sell about 100 to 150 mobile homes a year. And when I sell them, they happen pretty quick. And I had a really nice double wide that I bought up in, up in northern Oakland County. And I didn't know why it wasn't selling. I mean, literally, it was like 5 to 6 months. And then I got the prompt from God. And all of a sudden, he said, why do you think you haven't sold that home? He goes, it was meant for Lindsay. And I'm like, I was blown away.
Dan asked me how I would feel if we relocated. And I, explained to him, yeah, I could never afford to just move because I would have done it a long time ago if I could have.
I said, listen, God told me that this park and this home is really was for you. And there's a reason why it hasn't sold. And I'd like to show it to you. So I took her up, walked her through it, and she just walked in and started crying.
When we found out Lindsay was getting the new trailer, we were just beyond excited for her and her family. They all just have such huge hearts, the kids as well as Lindsay. And to know that they were gonna be in a home that didn't have bugs crawling in through the drawers or holes in the floor was just heartwarming.
Hera was kind of wondering why this silly home wasn't sold yet, and he had a greater purpose. We did some work on it, and I told the group that it didn't need much, which it didn't, but we thought it should be personalized. Pick your own colors.
Jeanette was just talking about her passion to make homes joyful. So when you come in, you just feel at home and at peace, and it's a place you can relax. And she had talked to us a couple times about how she didn't know what it would look like, but she wanted to start some kind of ministry where she could go in and do that for people.
Lindsay didn't know quite what her style was, so her and I just got to get together and talk about it. And it was like simple farmhouse, and she didn't know what kind of comforter, because she's never had a new comforter in her life. I love being able to bring life and beauty and transformation to things. Paint and helping them organize and purge can just be a thing that brings them peace and joy.
Me and my family are receiving a house, and it's all thanks to Brooke and Alyssa and everybody at Kensington and Dan Layton and FaithWorks, and there's just so many people that came together. I have no words. We have never had a table that we fit at.
My chair.
This is Gina's, this is mine, and that one's Jesse's.
Oh my gosh, oh my.
This is nice.
Oh my gosh,
I've never had something
they
like
have
this.
their vanity that they can put their makeup on.
What I like about it is that because we never had like a makeup stand, or like underneath like her bed, there's like a desk for everybody, and then like we have like this cool chair, and then like it's just cool.
This is crazy. I have a desk in there, and I could usually like do my art and everything and do my homework. I didn't really get to do that in my old house that much.
I like my bed.
You like your bed?
Yeah.
Come home, Abby.
Good job.
Oh my god, this is my room, you guys. This is so amazing. This is like my room. This is seriously my room. Oh my gosh. This is amazing. This is something we've never had, and we've been through so much. You just have no idea for this to happen to us.
No matter what we was going through, like you can be going through the worst thing, and my mom would be there and be like, it's okay. Just if you believe in God, everything will be okay.
I really love my mom, and I feel like my mom really deserves this, and everything she's getting, she deserves.
Like I said, I could never sit here and say everybody's name. But those of you that know me, and those of you who don't judge me, and those of you who really love me, and I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart.
When I walk away from it, I just keep having that story about the loaf of bread and how God can turn your loaf of bread into a whole feast. We didn't really feel like we had that much to give, and Jeanette didn't really know what she had to give. And Dan had a trailer, but he didn't have all of the things to go in it, and we all just had these little pieces, and God just took our little pieces and he just made this beautiful feast out of it. And I think you just need your little piece of bread and he can do something amazing with it.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for another wonderful day. Thank you, God, for letting all of us live another day. And we really appreciate all you've done for us and these good people. And yeah, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here.
Through everything, God really saw what was going on, and he's the one who brought together all those certain people to help us out. Our relationship as a family has grown to be better with God, and I feel like we've become closer with him.
Just be obedient. Trust that he's got your back and he's going to use you for something special. And if he can use a silly mobile home broker to do what I just did, what's he going to do with you?
The story we just watched is a dream come true. Almost 30 years ago when we started Kensington, we dreamed that the people sitting in our seats would feel like they are as much ministers as the people on our stage. That they would hear from God, obey him, and go change lives. We have a phrase for it. We call it move out. Move out and go do what God's called you to do. And we just watched Dan and Brooke and Alyssa literally changing lives and even legacies because they heard from God and they took action and they moved out. Here's the amazing thing. When you and I give a year-end Christmas gift to Kensington, we empower people to change lives through our Move Out network. You just watch that, and you can be a part of that. And so as Ann and I give a year-end Christmas gift to Kensington, I want to invite you to join us. You know why? Because when we give and you give, we change lives just like you watched every day of the year.
That was a powerful story, wasn't it? I wasn't expecting that. I don't always watch them, so usually at 9 o'clock, I'll try to watch them for the first time and get a first reaction. And so I knew bits and pieces. Now it hit home. Sorry, I'm trying to get emotional. I grew up in a single-parent home, too. And the local church, I'm sorry, through people who gave just like that. My mother got sick, and we lost our home. I'm sorry. And that was kind of our story as well. Sorry. Maybe I won't do that at 11. I've seen it, sorry. And the desk that we still have at our house was given by a group of people who gave. And that's still the one that that's still the one that I write on. So I just want to say this. And, this feels manipulative, and it's totally not. I don't get emotional very often. Sorry. I love what we get to be as a church, not just because we gather and because we sing and you hear talks from me with my little Britney Spears mic for 40 minutes, but I love that life change happens because you give and you serve and you volunteer outside of this place. And our end goal isn't that you come on a Sunday only. Our end goal is that you go out and you create church wherever it is that you go. And so for some of you, what we're going to ask you to do this year is we're going to continue to ask you to give, and we're going to ask you to see life change happen through you. And we're going to ask you to give sacrificially so that you can see more of those stories, and even probably more than that, so you can be a part of and know what it's like to be a part of some of those stories even directly. And so really without hesitation, I'm going to ask you to give. So we're going to invite our ushers to move forward. We're going to receive our offering. There's a few ways that you can do it. You can give online through text message at 77977. You can give that way. I'd encourage you to do that. It's super simple to do it that way. You can give on our Kensington app, or you can give at kensingtonchurch.org/giving. Those are all easy ways to be a part of it, but we would love for you to join us in however you want to give and contribute in those ways. Sorry, we've got a few more announcements, then we're going to jump into the talk. The other thing, tomorrow night, we have a big event coming up here at our church, and it's for all the women in the room. So all the ladies, where are you at real quick? All right. So tomorrow night, it's going to be a dinner party right here in the church. If you were here, we did this summer as well. We will not be outside. We will be inside, I promise. It will be warm. There will be lots of food. We'd love for you to join us. And it's a great opportunity, especially if you attend on a weekend or if you've come to other things. It's a great opportunity for you to meet other women and be a part of something here. So we'd love for you to join us. It's going to be an incredible, incredible night. They're actually working, I think, today and tomorrow, even just to set it up. So tomorrow night, right here at the church, we'd love to know that you're coming, RSVP. You can do it online, right outside at the hub, or just show up. Don't feel like you have to RSVP, but we would love for you to be a part of that. The other thing is Christmas is right around the corner. It's like sneaking up on us. Anybody else feel like Christmas is sneaking up this year? I don't know why, but it just feels like it's around the corner. At our church, we go all out for Christmas, and we would love for you to join us in that. And so here's what we're going to ask you to do, if you would. We do this thing called Christmas tickets. It does not matter that you have a ticket. We want you to come whether you have a ticket or not. This is really an RSVP. So the way that our church kind of happens around the holidays is there's so many people that come in and out of this building, and it helps us just to be able to prepare for how many people are coming. So if you would, you can either do this on your cell phone right now. It takes like 30 seconds. You can go to kensingtonchurch.com/tickets, and you can fill it out there, and then when you do that, we can kind of set you up, and it'll give you like a confirmation. But just let us know how many people are coming with you and your family, all of those things, and we would love for you to be a part of that. And then the other thing is our service times this year. It's going to be on the 22nd, regular Sunday services at 9 or 11. And then on Christmas Eve, we have a 4 p.m. and 11 p.m. All of those are going to be here. And then the 11 p.m. is kind of like a render style service, if you've ever been to render. So we'd love for you to join us. That's going to be across the hall. The other thing is if you call Kensington home, we'd love for you to volunteer for these services. The sheer number of people that are coming in and out of this building, it's just so many. And so we would love for you to help us make this a great experience for somebody else. So come one, serve one. Come one, serve three, however that works for you. But we would just love for you to help us create an amazing experience for everybody that's coming. Now, one quick caveat, and then we'll jump into the talk. Today we are continuing our series, Mastermind. And today, it's a big deal. And so I'll tell you right off the bat, the talk that we're going to give is probably going to hit home for most of us in the room at different levels. But we're going to be talking specifically about how to come alongside of people that we know, that we love, that might be walking a difficult journey when it comes to their mental health. And so we're going to be upfront. We're going to be honest. I would say also if you have kids for the next few minutes, if they're under like 13 years old, some of the things that we're going to talk about today, we just want you to be mindful of. Some of the content might be a little bit sensitive for children under 13, but we want you to know that ahead of time. But when we jump into the talk, we're going to kind of jump right in. We'll get you caught up on everything that we've said so far, and then we'll jump into the content for today. So to get us thinking about that, here's a short video, and then we'll be right back for Mastermind Part 4.
Your mind is a complex machine. Even while you're watching this, your brain is calculating 1 billion calculations per second that you aren't even aware of. Until maybe right now. You think that you're watching an animation and listening to my voice, but really, your mind is orchestrating the entire experience and simultaneously keeping your body functioning at its best potential. Our thoughts have powerful implications on our lives, but learning to understand the way we think and how it affects our life can be a difficult journey. What if we could better understand the world around us and truly take every thought captive? What if we could have a better conversation around mental health and it was no longer a stigma? What if we could have a better understanding of what makes us unique, how to manage our thoughts, and what it would look like to live in the process of healing and health in our mind?
All right, so today we are continuing our series called Mastermind, as I said. And I want to give one quick thing for all of you in the room that as soon as we started talking about like mental health and as soon as we started talking about some of this, and you hate to say this out loud, and you wouldn't because, you know, you're Siri, stop talking. That just happened. That was amazing. But when you come in here, as soon as we start talking about Mastermind, there's a part of you or a group of you in the room who immediately go, that's not me, and I don't know what to do with it, and you kind of distance yourself from the content immediately. And then there's some of you, when we start talking about specifically the emotional side of this feels like a distant thing because you don't interact with your emotions, even some of the ways that we're going to talk about today. And so here's what I'm going to ask you to do. If there's a part of you that immediately goes, we're talking about this, I don't know if I'm going to like check out for a minute, I'm going to ask you to engage with everything that you have for as long as you possibly can, right? Can we just agree to do that? For all of you in the room who immediately is like, I don't know that I want to talk about this. This is for you, because I promise you know somebody who needs to really have you apply this in your life. And then those of you who are sitting next to that person, I'm going to ask you to do this. Don't nudge them the whole time that I'm talking. Don't do it. Don't do it. You're going to be tempted to. Don't do that. But just every once in a while, just agree with me. Yeah, something like that. That'll help them stay awake, and that'll be great, and that'll be good. But I think for us, this is one of the most important topics to talk about, but oftentimes it's just not talked about in the church. And not only is it just not talked about in the church, oftentimes it's not talked about really anywhere. And when it is talked about, there's just awkward feeling around it. We don't really know what to do with it. And so we've been talking about it for a while. I want to get you caught up in case you've missed a couple of these sermons that we've been given. And so here's what we said week 1, right? Week 1, we started with a very simple thought, and that's this, that you have the capacity to think about what you think. All right, now you know this isn't like, revelation type of thing, but we ignore this a lot, right? Oftentimes we have a thought that comes in our mind, and when it comes in our mind, we just kind of accept it and maybe move on, or we allow it to kind of grow. We don't always think about what we're thinking. And the problem with that is that our thoughts have a significant, amount of influence in our lives, right? And you've heard all the quotes around this, but the way that your thoughts are, it kind of drives you into certain places and directions in your life. You've got to figure out, like, how do I navigate that sort of thing? And so the question that we sort of left you with in week 1 was, like, what direction are your thoughts taking you? That if you continue to have the kinds of thoughts that you're having right now, and if they went unchecked and you weren't thinking about your thoughts and they just kind of moved you in a direction, when you fast forward a year from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now, what would you be happier? Would you be less happy? Would you feel more joy? Would you feel less joy? Would your marriage be better, or would it be worse? Like, what direction are your thoughts taking you? And then we ended the day by saying this. We said that we will become observers and gatekeepers of our thoughts, right? And that takes discipline. That we're going to be observers. Like, I recognize that I thought about this thing, and I'm going to choose to be a gatekeeper of that. I'm not going to let just any thought kind of come into my mind and go unchecked. I'm going to engage with my thoughts regularly. And I know this sounds kind of weird, and it might even feel a little pop psychology kind of thing, but I think what we were saying is this, that when it comes into your mind, recognize that it's there, and then decide to do something with whatever those thoughts are. And then we went on in our series, and then we said this, and this was kind of fun to say out loud, but the church has often been silent on the topic of mental health, all right? And we talked about this for quite a while. We said this, that oftentimes when it comes to church, there's a lot of things that we do talk about, but this one is kind of difficult to talk about. And if you've been around churches before, sometimes they've tried and come out weird, and sometimes the approach to the Bible doesn't always lend itself to making this a helpful conversation. And so it's just been this kind of weird journey. But we said this, that most of us in the room not only will know somebody, but will know somebody close to us who will have some sort of diagnosable mental kind of health journey, right? That's what we've said from really day one, that most of us know somebody, and not only know somebody, but know somebody close to us. And so for us, we've got to figure out, how do we do that? And we talked about it throughout this message, and we said that when it comes to our mental health journey, specifically when it's difficult, that suffering is a part of our existence, and we have to acknowledge that. And then we said this, that suffering ultimately reveals that things aren't as they should be, but it doesn't reveal that God isn't with me. Which means that no matter where you are, no matter what you're struggling with, no matter what it looks like for you to suffer, that doesn't mean that God isn't with you, right? That's not what it means, right? For many of us, it illuminates that just things aren't the way that they should be. And then we said this kind of unsettling statement for many of us, including me, and that's this, that God's promise isn't the immediate elimination of suffering. God's promise is the redemption of it. That God is working through suffering to do things, right? But he doesn't promise just to eliminate it all on this side of our existence. And so we ended that talk and we said this, that ultimately for all of us in the room, there's hope. And not only there is hope, but that you are not and never have been alone in that journey. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to take it kind of one step further, and I would say this is probably one of the more complicated talks I feel like that I've kind of written. And the reason that it feels complicated for me is that it feels personal for me. And then for many of us, I think in the room, it probably is personal for many of us as well. And that's this, that we have people in our lives that we love and that we care about, and we have people in our lives that are struggling with certain things, and we just sometimes don't know what to do. And then on the other side of that, that's probably even more true for many of us, is even though we want to be helpful, we've experienced times where we've tried to be helpful and it hasn't gone well. Has anybody ever tried to have a helpful conversation and it just crashed and burned really, really quickly? Anybody? Yeah. Like you want to love them well, but it ended up in an argument, or it ended up in some sort of tension, or it ended up in something that you couldn't figure out how to solve. And the thing that's true about you, and it's true of me, I think it's true of all of us in the room, is that we desire to always be helpful and engage in a meaningful way. But when it comes to people that we love who are struggling when it comes to their mental health, like oftentimes we feel like it wasn't helpful at all, and then it wasn't really a meaningful even conversation, and then you would never say this out loud. You would never say this out loud. But what you've done internally is just distance yourself from that person, or distance yourself from the emotions of, kind of engaging with that person. And you find yourself at some point, along the way at such a distance that you're not really even sure what to do. And your distance from that person it doesn't have anything to do with how much you love them, because you love them so much. And it doesn't have anything to do with your friendship with them, because, you're BFFs and you're friends on Facebook and, you all this kind of, it doesn't have anything to do with that. It has everything to do with your insecurity about being able to be helpful and to engage in a meaningful way on their behalf, right? And so that's kind of a tension that many of us walk with and wrestle with a lot, right? I put it in my notes, and honestly, I was writing this for me. I said this, that our insecurities with engaging in helpful and meaningful ways, they're constantly present. Which means almost every time that you're maybe around them, or you're on a phone call with them, or every time you see a Facebook message from them or a text message, your thing, whatever that thing is in your heart, just kind of bubbles up, and you're just not sure what to do. And so you try things, and you try other things, and you have conversations, and you just do all this, and at the end of the day, you just feel like it's not helpful, and you feel like what you're doing isn't meaningful. And then the danger in that for many of us, right? The danger in that for many of us is that we become practically passive. Now, here's what I mean by that, and this is, again, difficult to talk about, but you're not a passive person, and you're not passive in the relationship in terms of what's going on in your heart. You become passive in what you're practically doing in the relationship, because you're not sure what to do. Which means that you could say everything that you feel, which is, I love them, I care for them, I want to be there for them, I want to figure this out with them. But if any casual observer were to look at what you're currently doing in the relationship, they would acknowledge it feels like you're passive, but you're not passive. You just don't know what to do, right? And so today what I want to do is say this right off the bat. We're not going to solve that problem, so you're welcome. We just raised that whole tension, and we're not going to fully solve that problem for you, so I'm just glad that I can help you feel that, and, we're all on the same page. But I do think this. I do think for all of us, we have to recognize that it's not necessarily a problem that we can solve, right? There's several business books that talk about this. I love this principle, and it talks about how there are problems that we can solve, and we should solve those problems. But then there are things in our lives that will constantly be a tension, and we have to figure out, how do we manage those tensions, right? This isn't a problem to solve for us. This is a tension that we have to learn how to manage, and we have to learn how to manage it in a healthy way. And so to do that today, we're going to look at a guy who wrote a significant portion of the New Testament. This guy's name is Paul, and Paul actually talks quite a bit about his journey and his struggles, and he talks a lot about these kinds of things. And then he coaches other people in the ancient world and these ancient churches about what this even looks like as well. But there's one passage in particular that when you read through it, the context of it almost feels like he's not talking about what we're talking about, but the further you go in it, you begin to discover the ways that he talks about us being deeply connected with one another and how we can do that well. And so he's writing to a group of people who are living in an area of the world called Corinth, and he writes to them in two different areas. We're going to look at two of these different passages. But in this first letter that he writes to this group of people, I want to read to you what he says about coming together as one. Here's what Paul says. Paul says, just as a body, though one, has many parts, but all of its many parts form one body, so it is with Christ. So when you think about, this thing that is humanity, specifically this thing that is humanity that's chosen to be a part of following Jesus, that becomes this, big C kind of church. It's not just all these individual things. It's not just all these individual denominations, all these individual people, that when it all comes together, this collective that forms one body, which means for us, in the way that we should think about ourselves within the context of everything else, we think about ourselves as one. It says, for we were all baptized by one Spirit as to form one body, whether Jews or Gentiles, slave or free, or we could even do this, Mac users or PC users, right? Lions fans and the rest of the world, right? Like, okay, I'll stop. Yeah, you get it, right? Whether we're Jews or Gentiles, slave or free, and we were all given the one Spirit to drink. Even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of, and what's that word? Many, right? One part made up of many different people, and then it goes on. So I'm gonna give you an example. So now, if the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not, for that reason, stop being a part of the body. Now, I love this because it almost feels like a kid's book for a second. Like, let's just talk about your foot as if it could talk, right? Now, I don't know why you picked a foot. I would have picked most anything other than anybody else hate feet? Can we just talk about that for a second? Like, you love your husband, but you hate his feet. Anybody? Like, clip your toenail. Okay, so anyway, all right, so you get this. Like, if your foot could talk, and it's like, you know what, I'm just not like the hand. I don't know if I belong, you know? And Paul's like, no. If you lose your foot, all of a sudden you begin to realize how important your foot is, right? And he keeps going with his illustration. He goes, and if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason, right, stop being a part of the body. And he's getting after this idea of these illustrations going, your desire to be connected or not connected really doesn't matter. You are connected, and we are connected. And he's almost giving this subtle thing that would also work in the inverse, right? If the foot looked at the hand and was like, you shouldn't be a part of the body, it really wouldn't matter. Why? Because it is a part of the body. We are one. No matter how many different ways that we try to separate ourselves and differentiate ourselves and become different things, we are one. And he goes on. But in fact, God has placed the parts in the body, every one of them. Meaning every person has been connected to this thing, and you really have like a say over it. You just are. You are connected to this thing that is living and active and happening. And just as he wanted them to be, and if they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but there is one body. And then he goes on and he says some really powerful thoughts about what it looks like when one part of the body almost feels like it's disconnected or hurting or different. And he goes on, he says, but God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. Now, can you just pause for a second? When Paul talks about equal concern for one another, right? He's talking about the heart of all of us as individuals, carrying each other's burdens and taking this on as a collective community. Not just the things that we understand, not just the things that we pretend that we understand, not just the things that make us feel comfortable or uncomfortable, all of it. The full gamut of each individual, we take on each other's burdens. And he says, if one part suffers, and don't miss this, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. Now, here's what I love about this. He doesn't say that if one part suffers, then some of the people or some of the parts suffer as well. He's saying, like, intuitively, when there is brokenness within our own humanity, you suffer as well. That we suffer along with one another. Now, you can ignore that. You can put it in a box, pretend. You can act like it's not happening. You can sit it on the side. But there is something in our connection to one another that naturally figures out how to grieve with other people that we don't even know. Now, here's how you know this, right? You know this because of social media. Like, you scroll through all the political posts, and you get through all of the funny posts, and then you get through all of the Peloton posts this past week. You get through all those things, right? And then you finally land on a post If somebody shares and it's about somebody else's kid and you don't even know that person, you don't even know their kid, but you see their struggle and there's something inside of you, and don't miss this, you're nowhere near them. They're on the other side of the country. You've never met them, may never meet them, but all of a sudden there's this like awareness of that does something in your heart. Or you hear a story and you hear a story about somebody else's brokenness or suffering, and all of a sudden the awareness of that suffering pulls you into it and acknowledges what's going on. Now, come on. And even more so with the people that are closest to you. Like you have that family member, some of you, like do we have any women in the room who have sisters, right? You have sisters. Like there's something about sisters. I don't understand sisters. I don't know that I ever will understand sisters, but I think there's something interesting about sisters that they're just deeply connected. And all of a sudden, have you ever had this, where one of the sisters knew something that the other sister didn't know, right? You ever seen this? And then all of a sudden it comes out like there's this pain or hurt or suffering, or there was that guy in middle school who did that thing to your sister, and all of a sudden you find out about it. And you don't take karate, but you know that if you did, and there's something about that awareness of, now come on, that when you find out, you both grieve for them, and you want to be involved somehow in righting that wrong. Some of you know what it's like to have a kid who's in their 20s and they tell you something about their pain or their suffering that you didn't know, and all of a sudden the awareness of that pain and suffering, it does something in you as a parent that you're not even sure what to fully even do with, right? And you both know and you want to be involved. Paul's point when he talks about this body is this, that we all hurt together, we all encourage each other, and ultimately we all are in the process of making each other better. The problem is that oftentimes we want to solve the problems for other people that we just can't solve on our own. And if you're in the room and you're a fixer, do we have any fixers like me in the room, right? If you're in the room and you're a fixer, the idea that you can't solve it drives you nuts, and then ultimately can drive you to disengaging in some ways and become practically passive. And so Paul, I feel like, as he writes through this, he talks about this one body in this first letter. He talks about all these different ways people encourage each other and love one another and what it looks like. And then in his second letter to the same group of people, he uses a scripture that we've talked about so many different times in the past. And he blows through this expectation that many of us have to carry the burden of somebody else and to solve the problem altogether. And he talks about what it looks like to carry pain and to carry suffering, to carry this angst and to carry this tension, but to realize where the source of strength actually comes from. And we've read it so many times together, but I want to read it to you again. The same group of people later on, he says this. He says, talking about God's response to him, he says, my grace is sufficient for you. That God's grace is sufficient for you. I am all you need, and I am the one who supplies you with the strength, power, and wisdom to move forward. Now here's the part about this that I want to just kind of acknowledge. No part in what Paul's talking about does he ever get after the idea that in and of yourself, or even God through you, will solve fully or fix the problem at hand. The promise that we find from God to Paul, and Paul in some ways to us, is that through whatever that process and whatever that journey is and whatever that suffering is, that God's grace is both sufficient to sustain us and give us wisdom and to actually make an impact even when we feel like we're not. The response is, my grace is sufficient for you. And then it goes on and says this, for my power is made perfect in weakness. So here's what I'd love for us to do, because nobody says this out loud. You probably haven't talked about yourself being weak in a long time. All right, can we read this together? My grace is sufficient for you. Can we read this together? You ready? 1, 2, 3. My grace is sufficient for you. Now say, here we go. For my power. You didn't even like saying it, do you? Some of you are angry saying it, The idea that, that there are areas of your life that you are weak and that you haven't fully been able to solve. But the power of Jesus in you and through you is actually, like, it's made perfect through your brokenness. And so Paul comes to this conclusion and he says this. He says this. Go to the next one if we can. Ooh, flies. He says, for when I am weak, then I am strong. Paul said, look, when it comes to the parts of my life that I wish I could just solve and wrap up, put a bow on, and be done with, it's in those moments when I'm weak that I actually find strength. So here's the thing that I wish I could do for every single person in the room, specifically those of you who are walking a journey with somebody when it comes to like mental health and this sort of thing, is I wish that I could, like, as much as I possibly could, not alleviate you of the desire to fix it or to solve it, but to help you to redirect your focus in a way where that wasn't the sole goal of what you were doing. For you to be able to redirect yourself in a way to go, like, it's not that I'm just going to solve this. In fact, for the duration of my life, right, there are things that I can control, things that I can't. For the duration of my life, whatever that process and journey looks like, I'm just not going to try to do it all on my own. I'm not going to try to solve it all on my own. I'm not going to just try to be helpful all on my own. That I'm going to come open-handed and work to apply this grace that is made perfect and this power that is made perfect through my open-handedness and willingness to lean in. That's the posture that I wish every single person in the room could adopt and to move forward with saying it like that. Now, throughout this series, what we've done is we've like paused, and I want you to be able to walk away with some specific handles on how you can come around people in your life. That if you were able to take this kind of posture and then apply what it looks like to come alongside those people that you love, I feel like how can we partner those two things together? And so what we've done throughout the series is we've interviewed a psychologist, and her name is Dr. LaTanya Carter. And I got to sit down with her for several sessions and talk about what does it look like to apply these things. And I actually, and this is kind of the caveat behind this video, this one was the one that I had all these questions for, and all of my questions, I felt like I don't know what to do with all these because I'm a fixer in particular. And by the end of it, we did this pre-interview where she gave all this content that a lot of it you're going to hear here. Yeah. And at the end of it, though, she just laughed at me and she goes, I feel like you need to listen to this over and over and over again. So that was kind of her thing to me. So I was like, maybe I should just lay down on a couch and we should talk about it. It'd be great. But yeah, so what you're going to hear is really like these questions are birthed out of my own struggle and insecurity in some of these things. But her responses to this and her practical handles on this are so powerful that I'd love for you to listen to that, especially for those of us who are walking this journey with somebody else. So let's watch this video together.
Dr. Carter, thank you again for joining us today. I appreciate you being with us. I know over the last few weeks, we've been talking about our brain, our mind, mental health, and last week we really worked to remove some of the stigma that's around this idea. But today we want to talk a little bit about, like, personally, how do we navigate this with people that we love? So I know for me, like, when it comes to people that I love and people that I know that are in my life that might be struggling when it comes to mental health, I don't always know what to say, but I know that I want to say the right things, and I know that I want to be helpful. And so just to kick things off, what would you say to that, and how can we come alongside of our family and friends who are walking that journey?
The first thing I would say is thank you. As a mental health professional, I know that social support plays a huge role in the healing process for my clients. And so anytime they have good support, it just facilitates how well they do in therapy. I'm only with these people an hour a week, right? So I only get to see my client for an hour, and then the rest of the time they're off in the world. And so knowing that they have loved ones, they have a supportive community behind them, I think is really refreshing to know and encouraging to know. So thank you for that. And I would also say, make sure you're taking care of yourself. Caregiver burnout is real, and it does no good to yourself or the person that you're trying to care for if you never take time to replenish yourself. So get into a good self-care routine. Again, taking care of your mind, your body, your spirit, and if necessary, go to therapy yourself if you need some additional support. There's also support groups out there for family members, for people who have mental health problems, so you can get together and share ideas, share resources. If you can't find one, maybe you can create one, even in your own church.
Realistically, what does it actually look like to provide support and care when oftentimes we may not understand the fullness of what somebody is working through?
There's a lot of listening. I think listening and asking questions, trying not to make assumptions. Really, ultimately, you're building relationship. Even though the person you're caring for may be your own child, maybe your spouse, it's a different type of relationship when you're talking about mental health, because that's something so personal and so sensitive for some people. And so you're really trying to meet them where they are and move from there. So, for example, people who have depression, for some of them, it's really hard to leave the house. And so coming out to, have coffee or go to the movies is not something that they're necessarily going to do. But if you offer to come over there, bring dinner, have a movie, just relax with them, they may be more willing to do something like that. Teenagers spend a lot of time in their rooms, particularly if they're depressed or anxious. Parents have the tendency to want to, hey, come on down, let's have dinner, or let's watch the show. Meaning very well, good intentions. But for the teenager, that's just their room is their comfort place. And so maybe the solution is for you to go to them, hey, can I sit and watch, Netflix with you in your room, or can I listen to music? And you don't have to say much. You don't have to say anything, really. Again, just being present with them makes a big difference. Also, sometimes caring for people is doing the hard things. And so if you have a child, for example, who is having some suicidal thoughts, you have to get that child to the hospital. A lot of parents sometimes will just say, well, I can watch them, I'll put all the pills away and the knives away and it'll be okay. But if your child really wants to hurt themselves, they need to be in the care of mental health professionals who can tend to them and get them stable emotionally. Same thing with addictions. Taking a person to the rehab facility is a difficult thing to do, but it's a necessary step for their healing. And so sometimes, really being there for them and caring for them is doing things that are really challenging.
When it comes to that, what are some other cautions that you would have in terms of approach when you're coming alongside of somebody? What are some other potentially harmful things that could be said or that could be done?
I think difficult conversations need to take place in the context of a healthy relationship. So the first thing I would ask is, are you the right person to have that conversation? If you're typically someone who, maybe you get into arguments a lot with this person, or there's a power struggle, or, this person just typically doesn't take your advice anyway,
Right.
You may not be the right person to bring this up,
Sure. Right.
Maybe there's someone who has a more intimate relationship with that individual who would be better suited to have that conversation, or the two of you together can meet with that person to have that conversation. I also would avoid the ambush approach.
Right.
We don't need to have interventions.
Sure.
I think that can feel very alarming to an individual to walk into a room and there's like 5 or 6 people there to talk about their mental health.
Sure.
That's stressful.
Right.
And so you want to make sure that you let the person know ahead of time, hey, I'd like to talk to you about a few things. Is there a time when we can sit down and meet? And you want to make sure there's no distractions. You can talk uninterrupted. And really get across the points that you want to say. Also, you don't want to assume that you know what's happening with a person. You want to ask them what's going on. Share your observations as well. For example, you might say, I haven't noticed that you've been spending a lot of time with us. You're kind of withdrawn from us. And I'm wondering if we could talk more about why that is, what's going on. Instead of saying, you haven't been spending time with us, I think you're depressed.
Sure.
Right? You're making an assumption about what's going on with that individual instead of opening up a conversation to discuss what is actually happening.
That's great. Dr. Carter, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
From our time together, and we spent quite a bit of time talking about things, I asked her in particular, I was like, what would you say to someone like me who goes, I can't apply everything right now, but I'm trying to figure out what are the few things that you would encourage me to do, specifically with the people in my life that I love, but I'm kind of prone to this like practical passivity with. And I want to tell you what she said to me, and these are the things that we talked about that day. She said this, and when it comes to my relationships with other people, right, I'm going to choose to lean in when it would be easier for me to pull away. Now, this one's kind of like a no-brainer in some ways, it feels like. At the end of the day, there are moments that you will make these like crossroad type decisions, and usually they're in the smallest pieces of it. It means like in a phone call that you might or might not make, or how you navigate a phone call that you may or may not make, or a conversation like that. Or you might be sitting over Thanksgiving dinner table and trying to figure out like, how do I do this? Do I engage? What does it look like to engage? She said like the posture is, how do I like lean into those moments and those conversations when it would be easier for me to pull away? And then on the other side of that, like kind of evaluate how you're doing that. How often am I actually leaning in versus acknowledging that I might be pulling away? And the other one is this, and then for some of us, including me, it's probably hard at times. But I'm going to ask like how I can help, right? I'm going to ask that more than I'm going to offer advice or try to fix it, right? How can I help specifically? And then when I actually ask and commit, I'm going to follow through. Now, this feels like a no-brainer, but at the end of the day for us, it's like, how can I help? Commit to it, and then actually continually follow through over and over and over again in the relationships that you have. And then the last one is a commitment, and maybe this is just for me, maybe this is not for you, maybe she's just literally looking at me. So commit to being a person who would say, I'm not going to be the fixer, but I'm going to be a person who's going to choose to listen and listen open-handedly, right? So here's the thing. For some of you feel like that you have the wisdom to say, this is what you should do, and if you would just do this, and it would work out, and you would feel better, you'd be better, all these kinds of things. But what she's saying is this, that at the end of the day, what would it look like for you to lean in an open-handed posture and say, I'm going to listen, and I'm not going to try to fix everything, but I'm going to be intentional about what it looks like to kind of like water this relationship as it grows and to be there with you as you do that. So throughout this series, we've posted all these videos online. We'd love for you to engage with them. We actually put more of them online than you've even seen here, so we would love for you to look at that. You can go to kensingtonchurch.org/care to see those examples and to see more content from Dr. Carter. But here's how I wanted to end up our time today, and then we're going to wrap up our series with it next week before Christmas. When it comes to this, there's a part of me, and my gut says for many of us in the room, there's a part of you that kind of carries whatever burdens we have like this on our own, and we don't always acknowledge what Paul talks about in terms of the power of God's strength through our weakness. And so to end our time today, we're going to sing a song together, and the song that we're going to sing is a song called Living Hope. And the beautiful part about this song is it really outlines what the power that we have, actually, where it actually comes from, and how we can actually apply to our life and access that. But it begins with the posture, and the posture is acknowledging that it's not all up to you, that you don't carry this burden all on your own, and that you don't figure this out all on your own, that oftentimes we come open-handedly saying, God, here's all of my brokenness, here's all of my weakness. God, move through me in the ways that you would. So here's what we're going to ask you to do if you would. I'm going to ask you to stand up, and I'm going to pray specifically for those of you in the room who are kind of walking this with somebody that you love. And then here's what I'm going to ask you to do as we sing this song out. I really do believe that there's something powerful about us singing these words or saying these words or reading these words and acknowledging some of the things that we talked about today. So as we do this, I'm going to invite you to sing with us, even all of you in the room who are terrible, terrible singers like I am. I'm going to ask you to sing it out. But I'm not just going to ask you to sing it. I'm going to actually ask you to sing this almost as a prayer of affirmation, saying, God, we believe this and we trust you with this. And God, we believe that you are our strength and you are where our hope comes from. And for those of you in the room who are not a follower of Jesus, what I'm going to ask you to do over these next few minutes, and more than anything else, just kind of read these lyrics on the screen and ask yourself this question. Number one, do you believe that it's true? And if you don't, is this something that you wish were true? Is this something like in your heart that you wish there was something out there beyond you that not only like loved you in the ways that we're going to talk about it, but also empowered you to experience the kind of life that ultimately you want to live? So let me pray for us, and then we're going to sing this song together. Let me pray. Father, we thank you for what you did on our behalf. God, we thank you for the power that really only comes through you. And for those of us in the room who this isn't like just a today thing, this is like a journey that we've been on for a long time. And many of us maybe have just found ourselves like, I just don't know how to solve this thing, or I don't know how to make this relationship the way that I want it to be, or I don't know how to come alongside of somebody that I care about in a helpful and meaningful way. God, I pray that at the end of the day, that we just all find ourselves at a place of commitment to saying we're going to continue to lean in, but not just lean in with our own strength, but lean in with the strength that you've given us and that you've provided. God, we know that at the end of the day, for those of us who want to fix it, like I just want to fix things, we all know that we can't just do it that way. So God, I just ask that you would help us to acknowledge that, acknowledge our weakness, and simultaneously acknowledge the power that comes from you. So I pray for the person who over the next year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, those relationships may not ever feel like they're fixed in the way that they think they should. God, I ask that you would give them strength for that journey and wisdom for that journey. God, I pray for healing in those relationships. I pray for patience. And God, we pray that you would empower each and every single one of us to love in the way that you have loved us and to continually find ourselves serving one another in the way that you called us to serve. We love you and we trust you with all those things. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
How great the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Who could imagine so great a mercy? What heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to wear my sin and bear my shame. Sing the cross. The cross has spoken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. Jesus Christ, my living hope. All right, let's sing this all together. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain with salvation in your name. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain with salvation in your name. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe, and out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. All right, let's sing that again, a bit louder. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe, and out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Jesus, yours is the victory. Oh,
say thanks so much for joining us today. If it's your first time, we would love to meet you out in the lobby. We have an area out in the lobby called the Hub, and we'd love to give you any information that you have or questions that you have about our church and answer any of those and give you some more information about all that's going on around here. And the last thing I want to let you know about, because I need to remind you of, the women's dinner party is tomorrow night, right? So make sure you come and be a part of that. It's going to be a great night. We'd love for you to be a part. We'll wrap up our series next week, and then after that, Christmas. Make sure to grab your Christmas RSVP and tickets online. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you soon. Thanks so much for watching online. We're so glad you decided to join us, and we hope that you enjoyed your experience with us. I know that we talked about this already, but the Women's Dinner Party is here tomorrow night, and we would love for you to join us. If you're here in Northern Michigan or in driving distance, it'd be a great opportunity for you to come live and meet some people here at our church. We would love for you to be a part of that. Again, that's going to be right here tomorrow night at our church. It's going to be in the lobby area, so we would love to meet you out there. The other thing I want to invite you to do, if you're not currently doing so, is follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Those are really the best places to find out more information about our church and all that's going on around here. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you right back here next week. Well, good morning. How are we feeling today? Are we feeling pretty good? 11 o'clock. Are you caffeinated? How many of you have had more than 2 cups of coffee already? How many of you wish you had more than 2 cups of coffee already? No. Hey, we're so glad you're here. My name is Patrick. I'm the lead pastor here, and we're so glad you decided to join us today. If you're out in the lobby and you're making your way in, we'd love for you to come on in after you drop off your kids and hang out with us. We're gonna have a great day today. We're going to, we're in a series called Mastermind, and we're right in the middle of it. And throughout the series, we've been talking about mental health, and today specifically, we're going to be talking about what it looks like to come alongside of our friends and family and brothers and sisters who are walking a mental health journey, and we're not exactly sure how to approach it, so we're going to be talking about that a little bit today. But before we do, we're going to sing some songs together. I want to introduce you to a couple of people real quick. Actually, let's go ahead and bring out the worship leaders if we can. So this is Jay Kwan. Jay Kwan's going to make his way. Everybody say, hey, Jay Kwan. Yeah, where else? Everybody knows Ryan. Everybody say, hey, Ryan. Ryan Valdivez, or Siri says Valvadez. I'm not sure why. That's great. And then I'll introduce you real quick. This is Kayla and Joe. Everybody say, hey, Kayla. And Joe, they're going to be singing together today. And are you guys brother and sister? Did I make that up? No. Yeah, you are. Because I was going to be weird if you were cousins or something like that. No, it's brother and sister. How cool is that? And so Joe's been singing for a while with us, and he does a phenomenal job. And then Kayla, I'll give you a little bit of backstory just so you know. Kayla, we threw an arts, what was it, like a team night, kind of party thing, and we did karaoke that night. And she showed up, and she started singing karaoke, and I was like, well, dang. We should put a real microphone in front of your face. And she's just amazing. She's an amazing singer. So you're going to get to hear from her as well. Before we do, here's what I'd love you to do. I'd love you to go ahead and stand up, give 4 or 5 people around you a high five and say, you look great today. We're glad you're here today. Give them a fist bump, whatever it takes. Let them know how excited you are to be here. Hey everybody, this is Patrick, and I just wanted to say thanks again for watching our service today online and being a part of this community. Now we know that you might have some questions as you watch the service today and want to find out a little bit more information about who we are. And so we've created an environment for you to do just that. Simply go to startingpoint.today. That's startingpoint.today and fill out that short form, and one of our staff members will reach out to you very shortly and answer any questions that you have about our church and about who we are. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back at the end of the service today to give you a little bit more information, but we'll see you here in just a few minutes.
Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room. In heaven and nature sing. In heaven and nature sing. In heaven, nature's joy to the earth, the Savior reigns. Let men their songs employ. Fields and floods, rocks, hills and plains, repeat the sounding joy, repeat the sounding joy, repeat the sounding sins and sorrows grow. No thorns infest the ground. He comes to make his blessings flow. Far as the curse is found, far as the curse is found, far as the curse is found. The glory righteousness and wonders of his love and wonders of his love and wonders of his love. Sing it out. He rules the world with truth and grace and makes the nations prove the glories of his righteousness and wonders of his love. Come on, sing it out. And wonders of his love and wonders of his love. Prepare him room, and heaven and nature sing. Come on, you sing. And heaven and nature sing, and heaven nature sing.
Amen. So good to be with you guys this morning. As I was kind of preparing this morning with my wife, I was kind of singing in front of her. We kind of do that type of thing, and she pulled this thing up when we were looking up the song we just sang. And the guy who wrote it in the 1700s, and he wrote it out of Psalms 98, 96, and Genesis 3. And really the heart behind the idea of this song is that the nations of the world are asking to rejoice because of God's faithfulness. And that idea of faithfulness is something to be excited about, right? It's something that we could be so full of joy to be here and to be singing together. But then on the other hand, there's a lot of times when we're in December and we're buying gifts and we're going through holiday stress, and we walk in here and it's hard to kind of really be emotionally kind of engaged in that idea of like, man, God's been faithful. And so this next song we're going to be singing is kind of a little bit of a journey. Jaquan's going to be leading us in it. It's called Gracefully Broken. And I think one of the keys towards really understanding God's faithfulness is just thanking him for what he's done and understanding that we're all broken people. Everyone here on this stage, we're all just normal, just people that have hurts and hang-ups and need the power of Jesus to kind of get us through. So my hope for you guys as we sing this next song is we can sing Gracefully Broken through that lens of, man, God has done a work in us. We can be grateful. We can be rejoicing of God's faithfulness because of the redemptive work he's done in us. Can I get an amen? Everybody good for that? All right, let's sing this together.
Take all I have in these hands and multiply, God, all that I am, and find my heart on the altar again. Set me on fire, set me on fire. Take all I have in these hands and multiply, God, all that I am, and find my heart on the altar again. Set me on fire, set me on fire. Here I am, God, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken. My you will be with me. Here I am, God, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken. Here I am, God, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken. All to Jesus now. All to Jesus now. Holding nothing back. Holding nothing back. I surrender. I surrender. I surrender. I surrender. Here I am, God, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken. Here I am, God, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken.
Your power and work in me. I'm broken gracefully. I'm strong when I am weak. I will be free. Your power and work in me. I'm broken gracefully. I'm strong when I am weak. I will be free.
Your power and work in me. I'm broken gracefully. I'm strong when I am weak. I will be free. Your power and work in me. I'm broken gracefully. I'm strong when I am weak. I will be free. Your power and work in me. I'm broken gracefully. I'm strong when I am weak. I will be free. Your power and work in me. I'm broken gracefully. I'm strong when I am weak. I will be free.
Oh, good. They're pretty good, aren't they? For sing pretty good, play really good. Hey, can I know I'm probably geeking out a little bit, but can I introduce one other person? Everybody say, hey, Ruby. She is a high school student that is killing it on the piano today, isn't she? It's pretty amazing. Like, yeah. Yeah. I was playing Sega when I was her age, so yeah, life goals. It's funny, if you're here and you're new, I know this, like we talked about how Kayla sang karaoke, and if you're new to our church, there's really only two places that you read lyrics on a screen and sing along, and that's either karaoke or church. And but what's interesting for us, and I think what makes it really different for us here, is we believe that there's something powerful when a group of people come together and really proclaim what we believe to be true. And so if you're new, we'll be singing a little bit later on, but I think one of the best things I think you could do, and I tell people that are new to our church this all the time, is you get like a beautiful picture of what we believe that God, how he loves you, and we believe what God wants for your life, even through a lot of these songs. And so for those of you who sing along, I want to say thanks so much for singing with us. And if you're new and you're like, what is all that about? You kind of get a glimpse a little bit through those songs. So thanks so much for singing with us. I'll tell you what, you can go ahead and have a seat. Yeah, glad that you're here. Also, if you're new, I always like to tell people you're amongst some of the most generous people on the planet. When it comes to our church specifically, we believe that when we come together, we can do amazing things when we partner together and we join together to see some amazing things happen. And when it comes to this time of the year in particular, a lot of you give consistently, and then a big chunk of you actually give all at the end of the year. And so one of the things that we like to do is to share stories, to tell you a little bit about what's going on. And so I think when you came in, you got a book. Did you get a book when you came in? Why don't you pull that out real quick? I'd love to show you this real fast. I won't walk you through all of it. It's a great book, especially if you're new. Honestly, I think this is a great opportunity for you to see a little bit about what our church is about. Most people who come to our church, especially like if you've been around just for a little while, a lot of people assume that when you come to church, it's all about Sundays. But for us, Sundays are really an opportunity to springboard us into the good that we hope to see happen in the world. And so when you're here, when you give, when you volunteer, when you make this place happen, you're really a part of making church happen, not just in a building like this, but making it happen all over the place. And so there's a couple things that you can look at. You can see all of the initiatives, or many of the initiatives that we're a part of. But if you turn like midway through, let me just show you this one real quick. If you turn to this page, can we all turn to this page? It says Nepal on it. So when you pull this out, I think it's about midway through. Honestly, I wanted to highlight this one in particular. We talk about Nepal a lot around here. But Ramesh is a part, a guy named Ramesh is a part of helping young girls get out of sex trafficking on the other side of the world. And now for me, I think I've said this a few times before, but I am recently, is in the last year and a half, I have a young daughter now, so she's like 1 year old now, and which is weird. That happened fast. And but yeah, there's something about like daughters and girls. I don't know, like when you're a dad of young girls, it's just different. Am I right, fellas? Like it's just different, right? There's something about that. Like I love my son, but I throw him around. But Eleanor, I'm just like, I don't know what to do. I'm scared I'm gonna hurt. I don't know. Like this is a precious thing, And so for me, when I first heard about what was going on over in Nepal and the ways that we're partnering with these young girls, it's an extraordinary thing. And so what we're doing over there, what Ramesh is leading over there, is they actually put people on the border, and they're specifically watching for young girls who might be crossing the border and would eventually move into sex trafficking. And so there's a group of people on the border that are making sure that doesn't happen. And to date, we're talking 6 figures, the number of girls that they've stopped at the border and they've come out of that. But then the other side of this, and this is the beautiful part, is they're helping them be trained and get skill sets that can help them to have a job on the other side of that, so that they're not in some ways dependent on some of these things that have been going on over there. And it's an amazing opportunity. And if you come in like week in and week out and you sing the songs and then you hear me speak for a little bit, oftentimes we don't recognize that all of this is really kind of a passageway into us being mobilized into doing amazing things around the world. And so when you give here, you're part of things like that. Again, you can read through all the initiatives, but you're part of things like what we're doing in Nepal. You're part of bringing life change to things locally as well. And so I want to say to those of you who give here, thank you so much for being a part. Thank you for giving sacrificially. Thank you for giving above and beyond. And if you give here to our church and you call Kensington home, I would challenge you as we kind of move into the Christmas season. We said this last week as well, but like, what would it take for you to sacrificially give during this season beyond just presents and gifts and nativity sets around you, like all of those kind of things? All those are great, and all the Christmas season stuff is great, but like, what does it mean to actually like give beyond that to help change a life when it comes to this season? So if you call Kensington home, we're going to challenge you to do that. And the other thing that we've been doing is we've been sharing stories of life change at our church. Now, I told a 9 o'clock crowd this, and I kind of choked up, honestly. We tell stories, and usually I try to watch them on Sundays so I can kind of be in the moment. I try not to watch them as much during the week, and then I watch them on Sundays. And I don't know, I was prepared for the video that I was about to watch this morning. And so this morning, you're going to get to hear an extremely powerful story. And as it kind of unfolds, what I'm going to ask you to do is to pay attention to the connections that are made through it. Because the story that you're going to hear is a story of life change, but it's not a story of life change that's in a vacuum. It's a story of life change where there were several parts and several different people who came alongside of this particular family and did something amazing on their behalf. So we're going to watch this story. I'll come back at the end here in just a minute to tell you a little bit more about it. But pay attention to that thread throughout. Let's watch this together.
I feel peace. It's just beautiful, perfect, and it's special.
I interned with Kensington about 4 years ago, and my big takeaway from the internship was just this sense of community and being intentional about the community around you and where God has placed you. And I just had this nudge to move into a trailer park and start this idea of a trailer park ministry. We do community events and we have assistance programs for the whole family.
Food programs and clothing programs as well.
We had met Lindsay, and that was about 2 years ago. Her kids started coming to House of Hope to our youth nights because they saw a flyer in the park office.
People always ask me, how do you do it? And I say, you know what? You just do it. You just do it. Because I can tell you one thing is every day's not boring because we never know what's gonna happen. Our days are crazy. My kids are so amazing. Like, I have daughters that are my best friends. And my boys are so awesome.
And we got to know her as a person, but we also got to know some needs that we weren't aware of. We got to hear more about what was going on in her home.
It was just like a lot of us in like one house, and it was like really small, and like we would go like out in the living room, and then our brothers would always be in the way because they don't have a room. We didn't have a door for our bedroom, so like our brothers were always like coming in and being annoying.
Jojo and Ralphie slept in my room. Me and Javi and the baby slept in my bed. Angelina and Jesse slept in their room, and then Jesse had a little like bed in the living room.
I first heard of Lindsay from Alyssa from House of Hope. And she texted me regarding Lindsay because she knew I was a mobile home guy. She reached out to me just stating that, you know, Lindsay needed some help. As a single mom with 7 kids, her mobile home was becoming dilapidated, and would you mind, you know, taking a look? And I said, sure. I kind of gasped when I walked up to it, like shocked, like, wow. Did I get the right address? You know, and I walked up, knocked on the door, and cheery lady, Lindsay, answered the door, and I told her I'm here to look at your house. I'm from FaithWorks.
Things started to fall apart like little by little, I guess. Like we had no windows at one point in time. Like we had cardboard over the windows. Oh, the floor was like caving in the living room. So like you would walk on it and you would like almost fall through the floor. And my mom had to keep like this big table over it.
I was so thankful for it. It had heat. It had hot water. And I kept it really clean. But there was so much stuff wrong.
The rot on the wood and the steps that were just, you know, really unsafe. She couldn't even wash dishes in her sink because the faucet had failed, and they were washing all their dishes in their bathtub. I mean, imagine that, going from your kitchen all the way to your bathtub to wash dishes every day with 7 kids. So
They started fixing up some things around Lindsay's trailer, but it just became very apparent that there's only so much you can do.
the Holy Spirit kept on telling me, Dan, I got bigger plans for her than this. And so I really paused. I had to pause the work because it was so obvious that there was a different plan. I just had to ask him, what do you have in mind? I buy and sell about 100 to 150 mobile homes a year. And when I sell them, they happen pretty quick. And I had a really nice double wide that I bought up in northern Oakland County. And I didn't know why it wasn't selling. I mean, literally, it was like 5 to 6 months. And then I got the prompt from God. And all of a sudden, he said, why do you think you haven't sold that home? He goes, it was meant for Lindsay. I'm like, I was blown away.
Dan asked me how I would feel if we relocated. And I, explained to him, I could never afford to just move because I would have done it a long time ago if I could have.
I said, listen, God told me that this park and this home was for you. And there's a reason why it hasn't sold. And I'd like to show it to you. So I took her up, walked her through it, and she just walked in and started crying.
When we found out Lindsay was getting the new trailer, we were just beyond excited for her and her family. They all just have such huge hearts, the kids as well as Lindsay, and to know that they were going to be in a home that didn't have bugs crawling in through the drawers or holes in the floor was just heartwarming.
Harold was kind of wondering why the silly home wasn't sold yet, and he had a greater purpose. We did some work on it, and I told the group that it didn't need much, which it didn't, but we thought it should be personalized. You know, pick your own colors.
Jeanette was just talking about her passion to make homes joyful, so when you come in, you just feel at home and at peace, and it's a place you can relax. And she had talked to us a couple times about how she didn't know what it would look like, but she wanted to start some kind of ministry where she could go in and do that for people.
Lindsay didn't know quite what her style was, so her and I just got to get together and talk about it. And it was like simple farmhouse, and she didn't know what kind of comforter, because she's never had a new comforter in her life. I love being able to bring life and beauty and transformation to things. Paint and helping them organize and purge can just be a thing that brings them peace and joy.
Me and my family are receiving a house, and it's all thanks to Brooke and Alyssa and everybody at Kensington and Dan Layton and FaithWorks, and there's just so many people that came together. I have no words. We have never had a table that we fit at.
My chair.
This is Gina's, this is mine, and that one's
mine.
Jesse's.
Oh my gosh, oh my.
This is nice.
Oh my gosh,
I've
and
never had something
they
like
have
this.
their vanity that they can put their makeup on.
What I like about it is that because we never had like a makeup stand, or like underneath like her bed, there's like a desk for everybody, and then like we have like this cool chair, and then like it's just cool.
This is crazy. I have a desk in there, and I could usually like do my art and everything and do my homework. I didn't really get to do that in my old house that much.
I like my bed.
You like your bed?
Yeah.
Come home, Abby.
Your job is to
Oh my god, this is my room, you guys. This is so amazing. This is like my room. This is seriously my room. Oh my gosh. This is amazing. This is something we've never had, and we've been through so much. You just have no idea for this to happen to us.
No matter what we was going through, like you can be going through the worst thing, and my mom would be there and be like, it's okay. Just if you believe in God, everything will be okay.
I really love my mom, and I feel like my mom really deserves this, and she's everything she's getting, she deserves.
You know, like I said, I could never sit here and say everybody's name. But those of you that know me, and those of you who don't judge me, and those of you who really love me, and I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart.
When I walk away from it, I just keep having that story about the loaf of bread and how God can turn your loaf of bread into a whole feast. We didn't really feel like we had that much to give, and Jeanette didn't really know what she had to give. And, you know, Dan had a trailer, but he didn't have all of the things to go in it, and we all just had these little pieces, and God just took our little pieces, and he just made this beautiful feast out of it. And I think you just need your little piece of bread, and he can do something amazing with it.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for another wonderful day. Thank you, God, for letting all of us live another day. And we really appreciate all you've done for us and these good people. And yeah, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here.
Through everything, God really saw what was going on, and he's the one who brought together all those certain people to help us out. Our relationship as a family has grown to be better with God, and I feel like we've become closer with him.
Just be obedient. Trust that he's got your back and he's going to use you for something special. And if he can use a silly mobile home broker to do what I just did, what's he going to do with you?
The story we just watched is a dream come true. Almost 30 years ago when we started Kensington, we dreamed that the people sitting in our seats would feel like they are as much ministers as the people on our stage. That they would hear from God, obey him, and go change lives. We have a phrase for it. We call it move out. Move out and go do what God's called you to do. And we just watched Dan and Brooke and Alyssa literally changing lives and even legacies because they heard from God and they took action and they moved out. Here's the amazing thing. When you and I give a year-end Christmas gift to Kensington, we empower people to change lives through our Move Out network. You just watch that, and you can be a part of that. And so as Ann and I give a year-end Christmas gift to Kensington, I want to invite you to join us. You know why? Because when we give and you give, we change lives just like you watched every day of the year.
It's pretty powerful. Sorry, I watched that a couple times, and it's extraordinary to see what happens when a group of people come together. And when you read or you see the thread of the people who came around at each part of it, and they kind of all contributed, and life change happened out of that. And so throughout this year, I think for us, a lot of you have been a part of this, a lot of you have been giving, a lot of you have been volunteering, and we just want to say thank you for that. But I think on this side of it, I really would challenge you. What does it look like for you to give in extraordinary ways? Because you don't know what happens on the other side of your giving. I told this at 9, and so I figured I'd share it with you too. Part of the reason that's so emotional for me is some of you know our story. I grew up single parent home. And not only that, but there was a time in our life where we lost almost everything. And in a similar way, the local church came around us in an extraordinary way. It helped us be able to have housing for a few years. And then on the other side of that, and I just saw it again. I use it pretty frequently. But we have this desk that we have at our house. It's this tiny little blue desk. And it's one that I still use pretty frequently to write on in particular. And that desk actually came from a group of people who helped us with the housing and then knew that I was interested in going into ministry one day. And I said, hey, we're going to give you this desk to study on, and still do. And I think for so many people, a lot of times you think it's either too small to make an impact or somebody else is going to do that. But I'm going to challenge you this season, whatever that means for you, give in extraordinary ways to be a part of that. And then if you're here and you're not a follower of Jesus and you're you know what, I don't even know about the church, or I don't trust the church, or I don't give to the church, all those kinds of things, I would just say what would it mean even if you give somewhere else? Right, to change a life even in a different place or a different way. We'd love for you to give here. But even if you don't give here, I think for all of us, what would happen if every person that were here, every person watching online, the thousands of people that are going to be connected to this moment right here, what if we all, over the next month, said we're going to sacrificially give on behalf of other people to see life change happen? So if you're going to give here, if you want to do that, there's a few ways that you can do it. Every week, we kind of do the passing of the pouch thing, and you guys can come forward and do that. But most people who give here give digitally. So you can text the word Kensington to the number 77977. You can give in less than 10 seconds on the Kensington app, or you can go to kensingtonchurch.org/giving. So we're going to give you the opportunity to give this morning if you'd like to do that. So again, we'll invite the ushers to move forward, and we'll receive our offering that way, or you can give digitally as well. Now, with all that said, we've got a couple other things I want to put on your radar. One of the things is coming up tomorrow night, and this is for all the ladies in the room. So real quick, where are all the ladies at? All right. All right, so ladies, tomorrow night we have a dinner party just for you. It's a potluck. We would love for you to be a part of this. So many of you have been to one of our women's ministry events, and it's so amazing. I mean, Kristen, Betty, Jesse, Emily, they all do such a great job of putting these events on, and we would love for you to come. Now, if you're here and you come on the weekends or you watch online maybe, but you've never been to one of these things and you haven't got connected in the community that way, we would love to invite you to do that. Again, tomorrow night it's going to be right here at the church. Sorry, what time is it? Is that what we can just yell the time? 6:30. I don't know how to do that with my fingers. Anyway, all right, so 6:30 tomorrow night. So join us tomorrow night, 6:30, right here at the church. It's going to be amazing. They're actually going to start working on it today, but we would love for you to join us tomorrow night for that. And then Christmas is right around the corner. It feels like it's snuck up on me. Anybody else feel like Christmas kind of snuck up on you this year? Like it's kind of weird? How many of you finished your Christmas shopping? I'm going to ask this every week. How many of you finished your Christmas shopping already? Wow, I'm jealous. And how many of you haven't even started? Me either. Great. So perfect. But yeah, so we have Christmas service times around here. Christmas is a big deal at our church. And this year is no different. It's going to be amazing. So we have services on the 22nd at 9 and 11. Those will be identical services. And then another identical service on the 24th, Christmas Eve, at 4 p.m. So we'd love for you to join us for those. And then at 11 p.m., we'll have a different type of service for our 11 o'clock service. So we'd love to invite you back for that. Now, having said that, because of the amount of people that we have coming through our building, specifically at Christmas and Easter, we always want to invite you, if you attend our church, to serve at our church for one or 3 of these services. That'd be great. So how many of them you would be willing to serve at? We'd love for you to come and attend one, but what does it look like to actually serve and make this environment happen for other people? So we would love for you to consider doing that. If you'd like more information about how you can serve, you can find out right at the hub in the lobby, and we'd love to connect with you there. But again, it takes so much to pull off this particular weekend every year, so we'd love to invite you to be a part of it if you'd be willing to do that. And the other thing every year is we do what we call Christmas tickets. They don't mean anything other than it's an RSVP. So everybody's like, do I need a ticket to get in? Absolutely not. But it helps us kind of know that you're coming and how many people are coming with you, because some of you have a lot of aunts and uncles and they all show up, and we want to make sure that they have a great experience as well. And so you can go to kensingtonchurch.org/tickets. It takes like 30 seconds. In fact, if you would like to do that right now, we have free Wi-Fi at our church, so you can do that on your phone. So we'd love for you to do that, kensingtonchurch.org/tickets, and just let us know you're coming. Again, it takes less than 30 seconds to do that, but it helps us be prepared for you and all the people that you're inviting and all of your guests for that. Now, lastly, as I said earlier, today we are in the middle of a series called Mastermind. We've been talking about mental health throughout the last month, really, and today we're going to be talking about that a little bit more, taking it one step further. But I want to give one caveat before we do this. I think I've said this, or a version of it, every single week. If you're here in the room and you hear like mental health and immediately you go to like, oh, it's going to be all feely and emotional, and you start checking out on me, here's what I'm going to ask you to do, right? I'm going to ask you with everything in your capacity to engage fully for as long as you can. And if you're sitting next to somebody who you know might check out at some point along the way, I don't want you to nudge them. I just want you to agree with me constantly throughout the message with like a so that they stay awake. Can you do that for me, right? So whatever that takes, but I'm going to ask you to do that. And if your brain kind of drifts in that direction, here's what I wanted to tell you, is that one of the best gifts that you can give the people that are closest to you, especially those people who might be walking this journey, is to have some handles about how you can interact with them in the healthiest way possible. So again, forget me, forget the touchy-feeliness part of like whatever it feels like we're going to be talking about, and I'm going to ask you to engage fully, because as we move through this talk, we're going to give you some practical handles on how you can do this really, really well. So with all that said, let's watch this video and we'll jump into Mastermind.
Your mind is a complex machine. Even while you're watching this, your brain is calculating 1 billion calculations per second that you aren't even aware of. Until maybe right now. You think that you're watching an animation and listening to my voice, but really, your mind is orchestrating the entire experience and simultaneously keeping your body functioning at its best potential. Our thoughts have powerful implications on our lives, but learning to understand the way we think and how it affects our life can be a difficult journey. What if we could better understand the world around us and truly take every thought captive? What if we could have a better conversation around mental health and it was no longer a stigma? What if we could have a better understanding of what makes us unique, how to manage our thoughts, and what it would look like to live in the process of healing and health in our mind?
All right, so one of the ways that we approach our weekends is that we kind of take a topic and we break it up over the course of several weeks. And so we are kind of like in episode 4 of this series. If it were like a Netflix TV show, you're walking in at episode 4. So what I wanted to do is, because of the complexity of the topic and how much ground we've covered so far, I wanted to get us all caught up. And if you haven't been here in the last 3 or 4 weeks, the great part is you're going to get all of those sermons in about 2.5 minutes, which you wish you got anyway when I was speaking, I promise. But we're going to breeze through this, and then we're going to jump into the content right after this. But I wanted us all to be on the same page on where we're going and what we've been talking about so far. So the first episode of this series, or the first week, we really started with one, in some ways, very simplistic statement, but one that's very difficult for us to keep in mind and apply, and that's this: that you have the capacity to think about what you think. Can we just kind of all say that together so we're on the same page? Ready? Like with, men with your burliest, whatever, and ladies, the whatever is not that. You ready? You ready? 1, 2, 3. You have the... What do you think? I was so good. Very burly. That was great. So you have the capacity to think about what you think. Now, I don't think about what I think as much as I wish I thought about what I thought. Like, I just don't... I don't do that as often as I should, right? Like a lot of times a thought will come in my head or an idea, and I'll just kind of let that happen. And a lot of times I'll let the thought come in and really let it take root and kind of grow, and I just don't evaluate my thoughts as much as I should. And the problem with that is if we're just letting any thought kind of come in without thinking about what we're thinking, our thoughts are taking us in a specific direction in our life, right? Now, so what we challenge you to do throughout this kind of, first message, we said, think about what direction are your thoughts taking you? Right, so if you were to fast forward a year from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, would your marriage be healthier because of the thoughts that you're allowing to come into your mind and continue to think about and mull over, right? Would your friendships be better off because of the types of thoughts that you're letting in and allowing to kind of ruminate in your mind? Would your career or workplace or all those things, would it be better? Would you be further along because of the things that you are allowing yourself to think about? And at the end of the day, we kind of wrap this all up by saying, hey, we just want you to think about what you're thinking about, or said, probably a little bit better, is that we will choose to become observers and gatekeepers of our thoughts, right? To just simply acknowledge that I think things and I need to observe the things that I'm thinking, and I need to be a gatekeeper of the kinds of thoughts that I allow in, the kinds of things that I put into my mind, and then I just need to navigate what that looks like for me. And then we fast forwarded the next week, and we took it like a giant step further, and we started talking specifically about your mental health, right? And we invited Dr. LaTanya Carter to be a part of this. You'll get to hear from her a little bit later today. We interviewed her around this topic, but we said this, that oftentimes the problem, especially about talking about it in church, is that the church has often been really silent on the topic of mental health, right? It's oftentimes just been very quiet about it. And part of the reason is, some of us grew up in contexts where people would use the Bible as, like a science textbook, and it's kind of hard to do that and apply it to this because that it wasn't written necessarily to be that thing for that application. And then oftentimes you've heard, preachers, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but I grew up with if you just prayed hard enough and you could solve that problem in your life, and then you pray and you pray and you pray, and then sometimes it just gets worse. You're like, well, I feel like I prayed. Why did it not work? And it's like, that's really not in Scripture like that. And you've heard things manipulated. And so often there's been, especially in my generation, there's been this silence on the topic. People just don't talk about it. Yet we know that even in this room, a high percentage of you, right, and this is kind of awkward to talk about or think about, but a high percentage of you watching online, you are at a place where you, at some point in your life, will have some sort of diagnosable mental health condition that you need somebody to help you alongside, right? In the same way that you would need a doctor for any other thing, you might need somebody to come alongside of you in this. And oftentimes we just ignore it, or we think that's other people, but we said, no, we need to talk about what that is and acknowledge that when we're suffering, there's something in terms of the spiritual component of this that we need to wrestle down, right? And so we talked about then during this week, what does it look like to suffer, and where does suffering come from, and how does that work? And if we're suffering, shouldn't a good God do what I think the good God should do? And we said, no, that's not really it, right? Scripturally, we said this, that suffering reveals that things aren't as they should be, but it doesn't reveal that God isn't with you, right? Suffering reveals that things aren't as they should be, not that God isn't with me. And when that's the case, we begin to recognize that it's God's presence that's kind of moving through us, that God is doing things around us, that God is with us, but he doesn't promise just to solve all of our questions and all of our problems right off the bat. And in fact, we kind of landed here, which is unsettling for me and a lot of us in the room. And that's that God's promise isn't the immediate elimination of suffering, but it's more in the redemption of that suffering. And in those kind of spaces, we talk about that, and we talk about the elimination of suffering versus the redemption of suffering. We said this, that when it comes to even our mental health journeys, that God's promised to be with us in it and through it, but it's not like a snap sort of genie and then it just disappears kind of thing all the time. And so we said this throughout that talk. We said that there is hope, and not only is there hope, but no matter where you are on that journey, that you are not alone. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to take it maybe one step further. than we have, and recognize that for most of us in the room, there is somebody that we love and that we're close to, or a friend of ours, or a coworker that might be walking somewhere on that journey, and oftentimes we're just not sure what to do or say or how to handle it or what those conversations should look like. So let's just take a quick poll. You ready? How many of you have ever had a conversation that you really wanted to go real well, and then at the end of it, it just crashed and burned in about a minute and a half? Anybody ever had that, right? It's called Thanksgiving. It's great. Right? Like there's this thing where you're just like, I just want the conversation to go so well. And you go in and everybody goes into it with, the best of intentions. But at the end of the day, it just doesn't go well. And what I know about you, and what I think is true of me too, is that all of us, we desire, right? We desire to be helpful, and we desire to engage in meaningful ways with everybody in our lives, but especially those people that we love that are walking some variation of whatever like this mental health journey is. And that spectrum is so wide and so vast that oftentimes, it's difficult to know exactly what to do or say. But many of us have experienced what it's like to try so hard to say the right thing and then it just come out so bad. Or we try so hard to say the right thing and then we say it right, but then it's received in a poor way. We don't know what to do with that. And it's almost like this weird spinning wheel where you're walking on like pins and needles and not sure what to do. And what you end up with is just feeling really insecure about the conversation at all. And you end up, and if you're anything like me, you end up with here's the topics of conversation that I know I can win with. So I'm just going to hang out in this version of it. I'm never going to touch the other stuff, right? Most of us do that with politics with that weird uncle that we all have too, right? This is what we do. We know we can talk about sports and the Detroit Lions and how they're going to win a Super Bowl one day. But we just don't touch that, right? We don't touch anything else. And so you do that. The problem is the people that you love the most, the people that you want to care for, the people that you want to serve, the people that you want to come alongside, they want more of you than just this. And you want more of them than just this. But you don't know how to engage with the other stuff. And what you feel, and we'll use a couple different words, you might feel insecure about talking about things that matter because it's gone so poorly over time. Or, for those of us who are guys in the room, we would never use insecure. I don't feel insecure. You're just a little anxious. You're angsty. You're a little angsty about it. You're not insecure. You're just angsty about it, right? You don't know what to do with it. And so what we do is our insecurities, they just kind of bubble up and they just move us in directions that maybe we shouldn't go. And the problem with those insecurities is this, that our insecurities, specifically in these kind of conversations, with engaging in helpful and meaningful ways, are constantly present. You see that person, or you get that text message, or you see their name pop up on your phone because they're calling you, and all of that comes to light, and you just feel like, I don't know what to say or do, and so you just default to whatever the safe boxes are. And you're not a passive person, and you love them really well. You're not passive. But you've stopped engaging in ways that would be sort of in that realm of it. And if an observer of your conversations or relationships with them were to just look at it without any context of your heart, they would at bare minimum just say this, that you might be practically passive, right? It's not that your heart's passive. It's not that you don't care. It's not any of those things. It's just that practically in your actions and what you're fully engaging with, you're practically passive, right? And what I know about you is that that's not what you really want. You want that box to expand to the things that really matter in those relationships. For those of you who are leaders in the room, come on. You want that box of influence to be able to expand in larger ways than you currently know how to do it. Now, with all of that said, let me just go ahead and give you kind of the final thing. We're not going to solve that problem today. You're welcome. You can go ahead and leave. And here's why. That problem is not solvable for me or for you. You don't just fix that. As much as you want to fix it, as much as I want to fix it, especially me, probably even more than you. I'm a fixer. You don't fix those things. Those insecurities don't fully go away. You don't all of a sudden magically know every right, perfect thing to say every time. you live and deal and navigate through the tension. Now, there's so many business books that talk about this. I think it's a powerful idea in that there are some problems that need to be solved and will be solved, and you will solve them. But then there are certain things when it comes to your organization, but specifically when it comes to your relationships, that you will just manage the tension and either navigate it in a healthy way or not, and usually you're going to come in and out of it. But for what most of us want, if we're going to manage that tension, we want to manage it in the best possible way. And when it comes to navigating people in your life who are walking some sort of mental health journey, right? People that you love, you care about, your kids, your 20-something, your aging parents, your friend or coworkers, when it comes to those kinds of relationships, those aren't problems to be solved. These are tensions that we have to learn how to manage and manage well. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at one particular person in the New Testament. His name is Paul. Paul is an interesting guy with an amazing story. If you haven't read the New Testament or if you haven't read it in a while, I love pointing people to read Paul's writings because Paul is very open and vulnerable about his own struggle with so many different things. But one of the things that Paul is pretty open about is what he views is how we're all kind of interconnected with one another, and what that interconnectivity with one another actually does to our relationships and how we navigate that. And so in the ancient world, what he would do is he would write letters, and oftentimes they would take these letters to these individual places where these churches were that he planted all over the ancient world. And oftentimes somebody would stand up and they would kind of roll it down or whatever the scroll would be or however they received it, and then somebody would actually read this and read it to a group of people, right? And so everybody would gather around. It was before microphones and anything like that. And so they were just listening as somebody kind of shouted these words that Paul penned to this group of people in an area of the world called Corinth. And what Paul says is kind of the foundation for everything that we're going to be talking about for the next few minutes. So here's what he says. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 12. Here's what he says in this letter. He says, just as a body, though one, has many parts, but all its many parts form one body. Now I want you to just think about this. In some ways, it's a no-brainer, but he's saying this, that all the parts of your body make up a body. There's not like just the one individual thing. It's like all of the individuals coming together, and they're interconnected with one another. And he says, so it is with Christ. For we were all baptized by one Spirit, so to form one body, whether Jews or Gentiles, slave or free, or Mac users or PC users, and we all were given one Spirit to drink. And even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of, we say that together? Many, right? So there's a lot of parts of your body that make up the whole, which is you. And he's saying, for all people, for humanity, for those connected specifically to Christ, you're not just individual things. You are connected deeply to one another. And then he gives these like illustrations of it, which are kind of funny when you read it at first. It feels a little bit like a kid's book, but it's also interesting. It says, now if the foot should say, let's just pause there. How many of you hate feet? Can we just pause? As soon as I started talking about feet, like, you're like, for the love of God, clip your toenails, husband. Like, I love you, but let's get it together. Like, so let's just bypass the fact that he's talking about feet and get past that together. But he's saying, like, imagine if your foot could talk. I don't know. And then what would your foot say about that? He says, because I am not a hand, I don't belong in the body, right? Imagine if your foot could talk and say, well, I'm not a hand. I must not belong in the body. Then he goes on. It would not for that reason stop being a part of the body. That the insecurity of your foot would not cause it to be outside of that which is the body. And he goes, and if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being a part of the body. Why? Because the body is a whole. The individuals come together collectively to make what is human. And then he goes on. But in fact, God has placed the parts in the body, every one of them. Now, this is where I pause. It's like we're comfortable with this idea to an extent, but not always fully comfortable with this idea. The people who are different than you are also deeply connected to you. Like the crazy uncle that you radically disagree with on Facebook about all of his political stances and all of his memes, and then that meme on top of that meme with the 47 comments underneath it. That uncle, too, is connected to you emotionally. That you're connected to one another, that there's a part of this that all comes together. We are all part of the body. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. And then he goes on. But God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be, can we say this together? No division. No division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, then every part suffers with it. And if one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. I thought it was so interesting with the, like, every part suffers with it, right? You think about this, like, when you think about social media in particular and the way, like, our awareness has grown over however many years that it's been around. You ever thought about how, like, sometimes you'll be scrolling through and there's all just the junk, like, okay, we get it, Peloton bikes, you know, whatever. And you're scrolling through with the ads, and you're scrolling through with all of this stuff. And then finally you land on that thing that one person shared, right? And it's like of a family that you have never met and will never meet, but they're talking about something that's going on, and it, like, grips your heart. And they live in California, which is different than Traverse City, Michigan, in December. And yet, in a weird way, you find yourself deeply connected to somebody that you've never met. Like, you've never met, likely, the people that you saw in the video earlier, but there's something inside of you that's, like, aware and drawn to the fact that our humanity in some ways unites us so much more than it divides us. And that when a person is suffering, that there's a part of you that also suffers along with it. And even more so, the closer you are to those people. Which means that when your 20-something-year-old kid comes back and there's, like, an awareness of the pain that they're feeling wherever they are, as a parent, there's something in you that you just can't fully describe, but the awareness does something and you suffer alongside of them. Do we have any women in the room who have sisters? I don't understand sisters. I never do. I just don't. I love my wife has three sisters. Yeah, she's the fourth, the other kid. Yeah, like, and it's funny to watch every once in a while. Not so much with them, but I think just other families, and you hear, like, there's like there's three sisters, and one sister is suffering, and then tells one of the other sisters, but the other sister doesn't know. And then the other sister finds out, and she's angry. And you know why she's angry? She's not angry because of necessarily what's going on. She's angry because she wasn't able, some ways, to hurt alongside of the other sister the whole time. Just so interesting. Like, I'm like, what is that? There's, like, this thing in us that we not only, like, see it and feel it and are aware of it, but we almost, like, are drawn to being connected with one another in those ways. Paul is saying, look, you and we and all of us, we hurt together and we encourage together and we make each other better. That's what this interconnected thing does. And on top of this, God designed you to feel that. God designed us to be interwoven in those ways. The problem is when we assume that it goes beyond that and that you can magically fix whatever the suffering is with other people. You know this if you're a parent. There are some things that you can help with, but you can't fix. There are some things that you can come alongside of, but you can't solve. And that part of the journey is knowing that the journey is coming alongside even in the midst of the crazy parts of it. And so I've read you this next passage before because I think understanding that we're all interconnected and that's God-given and there's a piece of us that are drawn to that. The next step of that is understanding that if we're in that journey with other people, what Paul offers as the closest solution to that is fully engaging with our own insecurities, knowing in full kind of view what our own brokenness is and our own limits actually are. And so later on, he writes to the same group of people in the same type of way where likely somebody would have stood up and read his letter. And he gets to this powerful part of the letter that we've read several times before where he's talking about his own struggle and his own weakness and his own pain. And he responds by saying, this is what the Lord says to me. The Lord says, my grace is sufficient for you. If you attend our church longer than, 4 weeks, we will probably reference this a lot because the power of this is so incredible, especially for all of the self-proclaimed fixers in the room. Because the thing in you that leads you to believe that you can be the, savior of whatever that thing is, or the fixer of whatever that thing is, it goes in contrast to the fact that your strength and your power doesn't just come from you. Paul is saying that even with my struggle, the Lord says to me, my grace is sufficient for you. And the next part is equally as powerful, and it says this. It says, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Now, so here's what I would love for us to do. Can we do this together? Ready? I want to read that because you never say that. And some of you would never read this out loud, even if you're reading your Bible on your own by yourself. Like, you just would never say this, right? And I think there's something so powerful about us actually saying this out loud together. So we're going to start at my grace is sufficient. We're going to read it together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. My grace is sufficient for my made perfect in. Yeah, see, all the guys dropped out of weakness. I'm with you. Like, you just like, my power is made perfect. Yeah. Like, it's just weird. What is that, right? Paul's saying, like, the acknowledgement of the things and my own limitations, the things that I can't solve, the things that I can't fix, the things that I just can't. That your power is made perfect in my brokenness, in my weakness, in my own limitations. So Paul then comes to the conclusion, and he says this. And so for when I am weak, then I am strong. Now here's why this matters so much. Come on, look at me just for a second. Here's why this matters so much. It's for some of us in the room, we have spun our wheels for a long time in these relationships. And the deeper frustration for you is that you haven't figured out a way to solve the problem. And you may get to 60 years old or 70 years old or 80 years old or 90 years old or 120 years old. And that problem may never be solved. And that the end goal for you is that there's this solving and the fixing and that you're the one who solves and fixes it. Come on. That may be not at all what happens. The power is in the journey and in the way that you manage the tension and the posture by which you approach that. Look at me, come on. The posture by which you approach that will change the trajectory of the entire relationship. The people in your life who are walking like this mental health journey that you don't know what to say and you don't know what to do, the temptation is to kind of pull back and be practically, passive. But God is like saying, your insecurity, yeah, I see that. That's an opportunity for my power to be made perfect through you. Will you say it right all the time? Absolutely not. Will Thanksgiving still be awkward? Yes. But there are moments that you even think they don't go well that God might be using for the benefit and the power of somebody else. That there are things that you might be struggling with, like, I don't know how to say this. I almost always open conversations with, give me grace. I'm probably not going to say this really well. And then you have to decide whether you're going to say it. For those of you who are parents and you're 20 or 25-year-old, there's always, like, no matter what you say is wrong, right? You ever had that? Like, yeah, I do that to my mom sometimes. And it's not that it's wrong. It's just I'm being an idiot, That's me, like I did that over Thanksgiving. Love you, Mom. Hearts. Anyway, so but there's this part where you go, like, I'm going to lean into it anyway. I'm going to dive into it. So I wanted you to hear the posture part of it. And then I talked to Dr. Carter about this, and I'll tell you the kind of behind the scenes of this that no other campus gets. So you get this mostly because I was interviewing her. Is we did all these pre-interviews about this one in particular, and we did all the other ones, but this was the one I really wanted to talk about because mostly I just wanted free advice from her on this. And so I told her, I'm like, I feel like I'm a fixer. What would you say to the fixers? And then she started talking. She didn't stop talking for a long time. And then we started talking about me for an even longer time. And essentially I just laid down on a couch, and I was like, no, I'm kidding. No, and so I'll tell you this, the next few minutes of this conversation is powerful because I think a lot of us have asked this same question, but we kind of get after the idea of how do we approach people in our lives who might be walking this journey and we're not sure what to do with it. And she gives extraordinary handles on how we can approach that in a healthy way. Let's watch this together.
Dr. Carter, thank you again for joining us today. I appreciate you being with us. I know over the last few weeks, we've been talking about our brain, our mind, mental health, and last week we really worked to remove some of the stigma that's around this idea. But today we want to talk a little bit about, like, personally, how do we navigate this with people that we love? So I know for me, like, when it comes to people that I love and people that I know that are in my life that might be struggling when it comes to mental health, I don't always know what to say, but I know that I want to say the right things, and I know that I want to be helpful. And so just to kick things off, what would you say to that, and how can we come alongside of our family and friends who are walking that journey?
The first thing I would say is thank you. As a mental health professional, I know that social support plays a huge role in the healing process for my clients. And so anytime they have good support, it just facilitates how well they do in therapy. I'm only with these people an hour a week, right? So I only get to see my client for an hour, and then the rest of the time they're off in the world. And so knowing that they have loved ones, they have a supportive community behind them, I think is really refreshing to know and encouraging to know. So thank you for that. And I would also say, make sure you're taking care of yourself. Caregiver burnout is real, and it does no good to yourself or the person that you're trying to care for if you never take time to replenish yourself. So get into a good self-care routine. Again, taking care of your mind, your body, your spirit, and if necessary, go to therapy yourself if you need some additional support. There's also support groups out there for family members, for people who have mental health problems. So you can get together and share ideas, share resources. If you can't find one, maybe you can create one, even in your own church.
Realistically, what does it actually look like to provide support and care when oftentimes we may not understand the fullness of what somebody's working through?
There's a lot of listening. I think listening and asking questions, trying not to make assumptions. Really, ultimately, you're building relationship. Even though the person you're caring for may be your own child, maybe your spouse, it's a different type of relationship when you're talking about mental health, because that's something so personal and so sensitive for some people. And so you're really trying to meet them where they are and move from there. So, for example, people who have depression, for some of them, it's really hard to leave the house. And so coming out to, have coffee or go to the movies is not something that they're necessarily going to do. But if you offer to come over there, bring dinner, have a movie, just relax with them, they may be more willing to do something like that. Teenagers spend a lot of time in their rooms, particularly if they're depressed or anxious. Parents have the tendency to want to, hey, come on down, let's have dinner, or let's watch this show. Meaning very well, good intentions. But for the teenager, that's just their room is their comfort place. And so maybe the solution is for you to go to them, hey, can I sit and watch, Netflix with you in your room, or can I listen to music? And you don't have to say much. You don't have to say anything, really. Again, just being present with them makes a big difference. Also, sometimes caring for people is doing the hard things. And so if you have a child, for example, who is having some suicidal thoughts, you have to get that child to the hospital. A lot of parents sometimes will just say, well, I can watch them, I'll put all the pills away and the knives away and it'll be okay. But if your child really wants to hurt themselves, they need to be in the care of mental health professionals who can tend to them and get them stable emotionally. Same thing with addictions. Taking a person to the rehab facility is a difficult thing to do, but it's a necessary step for their healing. And so sometimes, really being there for them and caring for them is doing things that are really challenging.
When it comes to that, what are some other cautions that you would have in terms of approach when you're coming alongside of somebody? What are some other potentially harmful things that could be said or that could be done?
I think difficult conversations need to take place in the context of a healthy relationship. So the first thing I would ask is, are you the right person to have that conversation? If you're typically someone who, maybe you get into arguments a lot with this person, or there's a power struggle, or, this person just typically doesn't take your advice anyway,
Right.
You may not be the right person to bring this up,
Sure. Right.
Maybe there's someone who has a more intimate relationship with that individual who would be better suited to have that conversation, or the two of you together can meet with that person to have that conversation. I also would avoid the ambush approach.
Right.
You know, we don't need to have interventions. I think that can feel very alarming to an individual to walk into a room and there's like 5 or 6 people there to talk about their mental health. You know, that's stressful.
Right.
And so you want to make sure that you let the person know ahead of time, hey, I'd like to talk to you about a few things. You know, is there a time when we can sit down and meet? And you want to make sure there's no distractions. You can talk uninterrupted and really get across the points that you want to say. Also, you don't want to assume that you know what's happening with the person. You want to ask them what's going on. You know, share your observations as well. For example, you might say, you know, I haven't noticed that you've been spending a lot of time with us. You're kind of withdrawn from us. And I'm wondering if we could talk more about why that is, what's going on. Instead of saying, you haven't been spending time with us, I think you're depressed. Right? You're making an assumption about what's going on with that individual instead of opening up a conversation to discuss what is actually happening.
That's great. Dr. Carter, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
I love so much of the things that she said. And then the other thing that we want to let you know about, too, is we actually sliced off several sections of those interviews and we're placing them online at kensingtonchurch.org/care, so you can see all those things there as well. So I wanted to recap a little bit from my conversation with her, especially afterwards, and kind of what we talked about. And she was coaching us on, how do you kind of come alongside of people who are walking that journey in your own life. She said 3 things in particular that I think had stood out to me, and so we were going to share this with you as kind of practical handles around this. The first thing is this, right? That I will choose to lean in when it would be easier to pull away, right? There's a part of you that at the end of the day, again, if you're like me at all, there are moments, and there's, hundreds of these moments kind of throughout your relationship with that person where you could choose to lean in or you could choose to kind of naturally pull away. And we're really good at both sides of that, and we're really good at doing that in really subtle ways, right? And so you get a phone call, and you're like, am I going to screen it or am I not? You get a text message, am I going to respond or am I not? Are you going to say the thing that you feel prompted to say, or are you not, right? At the end of the day, for these relationships to be as healthy as they can possibly be, it requires you to predetermine that you're going to lean in the moments where it would be easier for you to pull back. For some of you, this means you need to ask a question at some point soon that you wish that you would have asked years ago, but you just hadn't figured out how to ask it, or you're waiting for the perfect time never came. What does it look like for you to ask a question that needs to be asked, or to lean in with that person in a helpful and engaging way when it would be easier for you to pull back? Second one is this, and this one's probably harder for me than it is for you, but for me, it's I will ask how I can help, and then I'm going to follow through with the commitment that I made on the other side of it, right? I like to just dispense my wisdom, But for me, it's going how do I just sit there and say, I'm going to be somebody who listens, and I'm going to ask, how can I really help you along whatever this thing is, and then commit to what I can and follow through on the other side of it. Now, that seems so overly simplistic, but here's what I would say to you. How many times have you, naturally just walked through the conversation and never actually paused to say, what do you need from me, or how can I help you? You just either assumed or you went off on your own thing. What would it mean to pause and say, how can I help? And then on the other side of that, choose to follow through. And then the last one is this, and I feel like this is a commitment that I wish we could all make, and that would be this. That I will not be the fixer. I'll rather become a listener. Now, there's a couple words in this that are probably even more pronounced, right? And this is probably for me, maybe not just you. There's the fixer, implying that it's really me and I am the person and I am the hero of the story. I am that person. I am the fixer, right? Versus a person who would be one of many, a listener, right? I'm going to be one of the people who comes alongside and listens and responds in the ways that I could and that I should. And I'll tell you this, and again, this isn't for everybody, for those of you who are fixers in the room. These types of things are almost always tensions to manage rather than problems to solve. Tensions to manage rather than problems that you can solve. And knowing that is going to challenge you to, number one, say, I'm going to be dependent on your wisdom, not just mine. And know that you're going to be in it for a long game rather than short-term kind of gains. And know that even if you get to the end of your life, and this is where it matters the most, even if you get fast forward 50, 60, 70, 80 years, whatever it is, you fast forward to the end of your life, and you look back on your journey with this person through the relationships, even if they never, ever, 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 ever change, even if there's parts of the relationships that are very, very difficult, and even if on their mental health journey, there's always this struggle, when you look back on the other side of it, that the story that you end up telling is one or you came along somebody for that journey in the most helpful and engaging way, and that you didn't pull back, that you consistently leaned in, you consistently showed up, you consistently were a person who was listening, you were consistently a person who wasn't just trying to be the hero in their life, you consistently did something that was meaningful in their life. At the end of the day, I think this, that even if you're hoping that they change, there's going to be something inside of you that changes through that process as well. But it requires you to be disciplined enough to say, you know what? Your power is made perfect in my weakness, in my struggle, in my insecurities. And I'm going to lean in with all that I can around this person. So the way that we're going to end our time together today, so I was thinking about, like, what do I wish that you just kind of walked away, like, thinking and feeling and knowing? And at the end of the day, what I hope that you walk away thinking, feeling, and knowing is that it's not all up to you, and you can't solve it, and that there's a tension to be had, but in the journey and in that tension and whatever that suffering might look like, the God of the universe is present with you through every step of it. And so the ending song that we're going to end with is a song called Living Hope. And what it outlines throughout this song is a song about what it means to trust God, even in the parts of things that we can't control, and to trust God in what he already did on our behalf. And it paints a picture of the full gospel, which I love. So what we're going to ask you to do over the next few minutes is I'm going to pray for you in particular, and then we're going to sing this song together. And if you're someone in here and you're a follower of Jesus, I'm going to ask you to sing this out as a prayer, and more of like a prayer of like affirmation. God, here's what we believe about you. Here's what we believe that you're doing. Here's what you can do through us. And if you're here in particular and you're not a follower of Jesus, or somebody invited you, or somebody bribed you to come with Blue Tractor afterwards, however that works, you're like, maybe that was helpful, maybe it wasn't, but at the end of the day, I don't know what to do with all the Jesus stuff. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. You ready? I'm going to ask you to read these words on the screen. And you don't have to sing along, but I'm going to ask you to read these words on the screen and ask yourself, ready? What if that were true? And deep down, don't you hope that is true? That you're not alone in whatever journey that you're facing. And that at the end of the day, don't you hope there's a God up there who is engaged and present with you through whatever journey that you're walking in that way. So I'm going to ask you to stand. We're going to pray, and then we'll sing this out. We'll sing this out together. Let me pray for us. Father, when we talk about these kinds of things, most of us walk in here with a person or a name in our mind, and many of us walk in here with a journey that's not, a few weeks old or a few months old, but it's a journey of a long period of time. And God, many of us will come in, and other people in this room will never even know about that friend or that parent or that brother or sister or spouse or son or daughter that's in our lives that is walking this journey, and we just don't know what to do, and we consistently maybe feel like a failure, and we just find ourselves kind of running in those patterns. So I pray for the person in the room who has been attempting to do it all on their own and with their own strength. God, I just pray that today you would release them of that. And you remind them how close that you are and how powerful you are, especially in where they feel weak. God, I pray that for all of us at the end of our lives, when we think back on the journeys that we're walking with other people, that there would be a sense of joy in the fact that we got to walk a journey and didn't just try to solve a problem. God, I pray that you would help us to always keep that at the forefront of our mind. We ask that you would give us extraordinary wisdom and guidance in every word to say, and you would direct us through your Holy Spirit on knowing exactly what to do. And God, I pray that through that our relationships would feel rich, that they would feel the way that they should, and that you would use all of these moments to redeem even the most broken parts of ourselves. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
How great the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Who could imagine so great a mercy? What heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to bear my sin and bear my shame. The cross has spoken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. And out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Let's sing that a bit louder. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. And out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Oh, Jesus, yours is the victory. Praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Oh God, you are my living
Hey, I want to say thanks so much for joining us today. If it's your first time, we'd love to connect with you right out in the lobby. We have an area in the lobby called The Hub. Some of our team would be out there, and we'd love to meet with you and answer any questions you had about our church. And then one more time for all the ladies in the room. Where are the ladies at? That was better. That was with the bass lick too. Sam and Chalk, everybody. Yes. Hey, we'd love you to come tomorrow night, 6:30 p.m. right back here at the church, and hopefully we'll see all of you then. I won't be there, but you should come. Anyway, we'll see you soon. Thanks so much. See you right back here next week. Thank you so much for watching online. We're so glad that you decided to join us, and we hope that you enjoyed your experience with us. As I talked about women's ministry, if you're watching us online and maybe you've never been live to our church, that's a great opportunity for you to come and get to know some people here in person, especially if you're here in the Northern Michigan area. So we'd love to invite you tomorrow night, 6:30 p.m., right back here at our church, and we'd love for you to join us for that. The other thing, if you're not following us on social media, we'd love to invite you to do that. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Those are the best places to find out more information about all that's going on around here and even get behind-the-scenes looks of what's happening here at our services as well. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you right back here next week.